Okay, so I think we'll get underway here. 1:30, call the regular meeting of Township Council for Monday, February 27th, 2023 to order. Of course, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples, and in particular, acknowledge our valued special relationships with the Katzie, Kwantlen, Matsqui, and Semiahmoo First Nations. So with that, I'll get a motion, please, to adopt the agenda, receive agenda items. Moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Van Popta. Is there any additions, commentary? Seeing none, just show of hands. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Carries unanimously. Move on to B1, adoption of minutes for the regular council meeting on February 13th. Got a motion, please? Moved by Councillor Van Popta, seconded by Councillor Martins. Again, any questions regarding those minutes? Seeing none, show of hands. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Councillor Richter, are you opposed, or do you have comments? You're opposed, okay. It carries with Councillor Richter opposed. B2, public hearing meeting minutes, February 13th, 2023. Just get a motion, please. Moved by Councillor Martins. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Bailey. Is there any comments on the minutes from the public hearing? Seeing none, all those in favor? Anyone opposed? That carries unanimously. So move on to delegations, C1 from Justin. The Salvation Army Gateway of Hope. Do you want to combine them together, or do you want to do them separately? Yeah, feel free to combine them together if that's more efficient.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, no problem.
And if you have any questions, then we're happy to answer them.
Okay, great. Go
Thank
ahead.
you. All right.
Thanks. Just state your name, I guess, for the record, please.
Yeah. My name is Justin Napier, and I'm the Executive Director at the Gateway of Hope.
Great.
So on behalf of the Salvation Army, I want to begin by thanking the Township for your support over the years as we opened our doors in 2009. In my 7 years of being at Gateway, I can say with confidence that we have always appreciated the relationship that Gateway has had with the Township of Langley. And your support over these years have contributed to our mission of meeting human needs and being a transforming influence in the community which we serve. In terms of what we are hoping to provide for you this afternoon, I would like to just share briefly about the history of Gateway and its relationship with the Township of Langley. And afterwards, my operations manager, Julie Gilflin, will share about the work that we do in family services and community outreach, and how your annual contributions have assisted us in those services. My roots in Langley go deep. I was born and raised in Langley, and both my grandpa and my dad were local business owners here. Growing up here, I remember when Langley was mainly farmland and we did not have any kind of shelter services. And it wasn't until 2009 that Langley had its first official shelter facility. And as you may know, the Salvation Army is the largest non-governmental provider of social services in Canada. And in BC, we partner with BC Housing in emergency shelter services. As Langley has grown exponentially over the years, with it we have also witnessed growing needs within our community, which also involves that those who can no longer afford to live in our area, as well as those who are at risk losing their housing for a variety of reasons. The Gateway of Hope, I believe, serves as a practical and tangible response to the needs of the most vulnerable in our community. The most amazing thing about the origins of our $13.7 million project is how collaborative it was at its initial outset. It was a unique partnership of its time, which had the support of local municipal governing bodies, the federal and provincial government, as well as the Salvation Army. Truly, this has been a unique project. In terms of financial contribution, the City of Langley contributed a $1.48 million $1.48 million to the project through a land donation and a municipal tax waiver. The township committed $1 million to match funds raised in the capital campaign. And your financial support in this project has given us the opportunity to be generous to those who are in need, to offer a free meal every single day of the year, and to present someone with clothing when they have few items of their own, to give backpacks and school supplies to children for parents that cannot afford it on their own, essentially to give dignity back to those who have felt that they have very little worth. As time has gone on, there's been some adjustments in terms of what we provide for our community. Since we have opened our doors in 2009, we have seen a yearly increase of 12% in our services that we provide to Langley. The initial vision of Gateway of Hope was to provide 55 beds to those in need of a place to stay. And I'm sure many of us here know the numbers of our 2020 homeless count, which saw a 124% increase of homelessness. And in light of this, on any given night, the Gateway of Hope can see an upwards of 103 individuals staying at our facility. Something that we value, especially in light of our increases of services, is having a good standing relationships with our other agencies who access our services, because we want to make sure that our guests always get the right services and resources that they need to move forward. We are committed to being community team players here at the Gateway of Hope. Our community meals have steadily increased in numbers over the years. In 2010, our total numbers were just over 16,000 meals, whereas in 2022, we served nearly 110,000 meals. Our Back to School Backpack Initiative has also seen a surprising increase of 30% from 2021 to 2022, which Julie will fill you in on. And in the last 4 years, we started an emergency disaster services at Gateway, where we can assist first responders and those affected by emergency disasters. So for example, we provided food and sustenance to first responders during the Willoughby condo fire in April 2021. There is no denying that there are many complexities around the needs of our community, and Gateway is a response to some of those needs. These individuals who access our services are in need of a community to build them back up, to remind them that they are worth it and that they matter, and that is what we are in the business of, meeting human needs and being a transforming influence in our community. Over the past 10 years, the township has twice committed to a $100,000 donation per year for 5 years. We are here to ask the Township Council to recommit a $100,000 donation per year for 5 years. Thank you for your time and your consideration over this matter.
Now I can see. Good afternoon, members of council and Mayor Woodward. Thank you for taking the time to consider renewing the township's commitment of funding to help support the growing needs in our community. My name is Julie Gilfillan, and I am the operations manager at Gateway of Hope. I am invested in Langley and have passion for ensuring that we support the basic needs of those silently struggling to support the family. I've spent my whole life as a community member in the township of Langley. In the last few years, we have seen a drastic increase in Langley residents seeking support of all kinds. With rising costs of living, we anticipate this need increasing even more every year. Imagine being a parent and having to worry about how your child will be able to get to meet their basic needs at school when they return in September. Having 3 children in this Langley school system myself, I know the anxiety and cost associated to this. Not only the school supplies, but back to school clothes, gym shoes, hot lunches, school fees, and the list goes on as the year goes on. We at Gateway of Hope have the privilege of being able to relieve that burden by providing children from K to 12 brand new school supplies and backpacks. In 2022, we delivered 879 backpacks filled with brand new school supplies. Of those 879 backpacks, 47% of them, or 413 children in the township of Langley, were delivered backpacks with school supplies. At a cost of $80 per backpack, this program cost a total of $70,000. This was worth every dollar, as those children and parents were able to walk into class on the first day of school, confident that they had the supplies they needed for a successful year. Another important need we serve is food insecurity. Our emergency food hamper program has exploded in the last couple of years. Prior to COVID, this program saw 30 to 50 hampers being handed out yearly. When the COVID-19 pandemic began in 2020, people and families who had never, ever had income or food security issues were now looking for help. We received a call from the Langley School Board asking if we could help families struggling with food security. We didn't have a program like this. We didn't have the infrastructure, or we'd never done something like this, but we knew we had the infrastructure and the volunteers available to us to be able to provide it. So we started with 20 families. That first week, we were able to put food on the table for 20 families. We were so thankful to be able to do this, but the numbers kept growing. Within 4 weeks, we were delivering emergency food hampers to over 100 families a week. We were able to keep this program running for 18 months by securing federal funding and by having amazing volunteers that donated their time and gas to deliver to each and every one of them. This funding no longer exists, but we still see a need. We still see families struggling, and we still deliver emergency food hampers when the need arises. These families are now connected to our resources and can reach out anytime they need a leg up, and we are happy to be able to provide it. In addition, for the last 10 years, we have provided Christmas food hampers to singles and couples without children. Sorry. These food hampers provide hope during Christmas and a little bit of light at what can be a dark time for those living alone during the holiday season. In 2022, we delivered 416 Christmas food hampers. At a cost of $75 per food hamper, this program cost over $30,000 last year. Of those food hampers we delivered, 57% of them, or 235 of those food hampers delivered, were in the Township of Langley. We see an annual increase in need for this program of 12%, and we hope to be able to continue to support the increase going forward. While Justin already touched on our meal center, I wanted to provide you with some more details. Our meal center is open 365 days a year and is a place where many seniors, adults, and families are able to receive a meal every day. There are many seniors who come on a daily basis. There are no questions, no qualifications, just a need. If anyone in our community is hungry and in need of a hot meal, they can come and sit down and relax and receive food to help them sustain themselves that day. This may sound like something small for you and I, but not for many others. 110,000 last year. This is huge. They no longer need to worry about where they will eat, how they will eat, or worry about going hungry that day. This program has become a staple in our community and has cost over $200,000 last year. We look to community partners like yourself for support to be able to continue feeding anyone who needs it in our community. All of these programs and so many more are extremely important to our community. They provide necessities to those who would otherwise go without. Our building currently has a $3.7 million annual budget. While $2.4 million of that is supported by BC Housing to provide shelter and transitional housing services, we still need to raise $1.3 million a year to keep our community and family services programs running. This is accomplished by the generosity of donations from our community, fundraising events, and grant partnerships like the one we have had with the Township of Langley for the last 10 years. All of the work we do is done in Langley, and any funding we receive stays here to support the needs of Langley residents. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for considering renewing our $100,000 yearly funding for another 5 years. We at Gateway of Hope appreciate this partnership, and know Township Langley citizens do too.
Yeah, there's no questions from council, but no, there is now, but I have one, which you knew was coming. The operating budget, the 1.2, with the $100,000 continuation request. What's your current annual contribution from the City of Langley?
So our annual contribution from the City of Langley currently, they are providing the warming centers and the cooling centers. So that's what they pay for.
Tax exemptions on our land.
Yeah, and then continual tax exemptions on our land.
Do you know what the value of that is?
Do you know, Julie, what the value of that is?
I
No, but we can get back to you on that. That's not a problem.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks. Councillor Ferguson.
Yes, well, thank you, Justin, for coming today. Congratulations on your new position.
Thanks.
I've worked with quite a few managers at the Gateway of Hope, so welcome you and Julie, and I think it's a Christina as well. So thank you for coming today. Had the privilege of working with your group for years. I remember, I don't know if you guys were even around when we made that $1 million donation. And it was, I think, Gary Johnson, that's
Yes.
a name from way in the back, that came and twisted everybody's arm on both the city and the township. And it certainly, you've done an awful lot for the community, so I wanted to compliment you on that. I guess my question is there any future plans for expansion on the site, if I may?
Currently, there's no future plan of expansion. It's pretty challenging to figure out how we can expand our building as it is. Mm-hmm. We're constantly trying to be creative with our land and what we're doing, but currently there's no talk on the table yet of any kind of expansion.
Okay. Anyway, thank you for all the work you folks have done.
Thank you, Steve.
Councillor Van Popte.
Yeah, I'd actually just like to make a motion.
We'll come back to you for that if you want to do that. I got another speaker here.
Okay,
A couple
sure.
more speakers, but I'll come back to you. I think that's appropriate. Councillor Martins, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say hello and thank you for presenting today. I sit on your community council, and it's an honor to be part of this conversation and the process. And congratulations on the successful event the other night, the coldest night of the year. And you picked the coldest night with the snowstorm, and it was an honor to participate in that. And I appreciate what you do for the community. I recognize that you have the the extreme weather response, I will get this right, available at your building. And my heart is very much for the people on the streets, and in particular at these colder times. So thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you, Barb.
Councillor Richter.
Yeah, the 100,000 that we give you every year,
Yes.
what do you spend it on? Was it the food programs? I mean, that's sort of the
Yes,
impression
so
I got.
as-
It
yeah.
goes directly to the food program.
Yeah, so in terms of, as we mentioned, BC Housing, like the $100,000 does not say get double dipped into the sheltering aspect of things. So we still also, if we do have to pay for our own blankets, so funding could go into us purchasing blankets for our guests, because that comes out of our pocket. But primarily it goes through family services, yes.
Okay, and the food program that you're running right now isn't just for homeless people, it's also
No,
for...
it's for all, it's for anyone. So anyone, anyone even on council can come any day from 12:30 to 1:30 for a free meal.
Okay,
Yeah, so it's open to public. We see a lot of seniors and people on disability in the area who come and access our services quite frequently.
thank you.
Thank you.
That's great, and thank you again for that. And I'm going to do something a little unusual, so I'll go back to Councillor Brampopta. But thank you again for your presentation.
Thank you
your
very much.
delegation here today.
Appreciate your
Certainly
time.
understand the request and the need for the request. And when funding's established and you're reliant upon it, I certainly sympathize with the need to ask for it over and over again. So every 5 years. But I think it's good for us to consider that again under this council. So again, thank you for your delegation today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we're happy to come too to talk about it, right? To share what's happening, because I think you're all owed a hearing as well to know what's going on, right? So that we're,
And I believe the scheduling for that is underway currently, right? Yeah.
so that's right,
Yeah,
yes.
okay,
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you. Councilor Brampopta, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'd like to make a motion to refer the funding to the grant program.
Okay, so normally we do it under other business, but I kind of
Yeah.
like this process where the delegates can see what we're going to do, rather than waiting 5 hours for us to get to that portion of the meeting. So
Yeah.
if you wish to make a referral to the
To
consider-
to consider it at the
Time of the
in
grant
the grant
program.
program.
Okay, is there a seconded by Councillor Martins? Is there any discussion on that? Seeing none, I'll call the question on C2. That carries unanimously. So we'll consider it as part of the grant program, which I believe will be coming to council in March or April. Okay, thank you. Move on to delegation C3, Nicole Sirachman. Forward.
Good afternoon. I'm with the Township Council Fundraising BC, and I'm the event manager. And what I'm here for is to hopefully move one of our major fundraising events to the Township of Langley. We have been hosting Ride to Live, which is our annual motorcycle rally. And normally it runs out of Vancouver and as well as Chilliwack. But pre-COVID, we were finding the numbers were dropping. And then with COVID, we moved to virtual and have continued to see the number of participants dropping. So realized that we needed to make some changes. And the one thing that we were finding that we're coming out of it is we want to have a central location. So we thought the Township of Langley would be a perfect location to initiate this. Also, historically, this has been an event that we've had unlimited riders. So we've had up to 1,200 riders on any given day participate in this, but we want to simplify things and have a maximum amount of 200 riders in this event. Most of them will fundraise for us. It's actually, we raise about $80,000 a year for this event. This particular event has helped us raise over $1.6 million for the foundation. This year, we want to change it up something. We kind of want to keep it a mystery to the participants, so hopefully they don't read any of these notes. But we want to start everyone at the keg in off 202nd, and we will separate them into groups of 50 and direct them to 4 different locations, 2 being in Surrey, 1 being at the Township 7, and the 4th one I'm still trying to secure. But that's going to hopefully be sort of Martini Town, Twilight, something like that, that has that historic vibe for our riders. And we're going to have them get off their bikes and actually participate in an activity. So each location, they'll get sort of prizes and awards and just be at each location for a short amount of time. And the idea is that it'll be this continuous flow sort of on the outskirts of the township of Langley and Surrey, so we're not impacting traffic that much and not having big groups of riders traveling together. And then at the end, everyone's to go to the Fort Langley, and we're going to do a big celebration with food and so forth.
Just want to clarify, so what are you looking for from council? How can we help you?
We would just like the approval to actually move the event to the Township of Langley. I've heard that I need to go through this process.
Have you been in touch with engineering or other staff?
The Highway of Transportation, yeah, so they directed me here first, but, you know, we've been talking about how this will flow and how we can make this safe for everyone and still really.
Is it true it occurs in July? Is there?
No, May 28th.
May
So
28th,
it's the final Sunday of May.
Okay, so it's a little more time sensitive potentially if there's an approval process to go through with transportation and engineering.
Yeah, they said 6 weeks, but I mean, I'm hoping to have everything sort of into them in the next week or two. Our insurance, unfortunately, always transitions in March, so it's always a little, you know, jump in the gun sort of thing.
Councillor Richter?
Yeah, I was just wondering, are you going to seek any public input? Because quite frankly, Langley is a pretty quiet municipality and motorcycles aren't.
A lot, you know, actually my, one of my directors and actually our top fundraiser has an electric bike. So they're not all Harleys and not all loud and booming. But part of that is by having them sort of in smaller groups, you're not going to have that impact of noise. When we've had them go out of Vancouver with 800 bikes, I mean, it's a commotion. But the other thought process that I had is I've been trying to go to areas that there's not a density of homes so that there isn't that impact for people, especially on a Sunday morning, because they'll roughly be driving between 10 and noon, and then they'll be stationary.
Okay, and so you want to move it to Langley, what, permanently?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, like, it depends a lot on the feedback from the participants and stuff. But I mean, there's so much potential in this area of the directions that we can go with it.
Okay, so my question about getting public input from the
Sure.
residents here, are you going to do that before you proceed?
I haven't before historically. Yeah, we've never sought out input.
Okay, is that something you could do?
Yeah, I can do anything.
Okay.
Anything is possible.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Ferguson?
Okay, thank you, Nicole, Ms. Sarakman, for coming today.
Thank you.
And the cause is phenomenal, the prostrate and thing organized, because that's a big thing. Raising awareness is so important. I know we all, at a certain age, men, consult our doctor on a regular basis. I wanted to point out that I was just saying to Councillor Pratt that he helped organize something in Arboretum. I'm not saying you're going to go there. I'm just saying that motorcycles have been riding through the community for a number of years, myself included. So I hope, I'm not sure if I'm going to hope I'll have to register quickly if you only 200 riders, because I've ridden with the Salvation Army before here and Third Cav and a few other organizations throughout Langley. And it hasn't caused much of a problem. And I believe Harley Davidson's making an e-bike now. So
They are, which is helpful. But I mean, it's one of those things that, sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Just escaped me. Oh, I was going to say, I think one thing I wanted to sort of reiterate is we're like a small little organization in Cloverdale that's 4.5 people. But Prostate Cancer Canada folded in 2020. And so we now look after all the support groups across the country. So our need of generating more and more revenue it has expanded. And so this, I mean, to have this one is,
Yeah, thank you very much for going. I hope I could dust off my old Harley and show up for the event.
I hope so too.
Thank you.
Councillor Bailey?
Yeah, I had the, hey, Nicole.
Hi.
I've had the pleasure of riding in this event many times. In fact, I'm one of the organizing committees on it now. And it became especially pertinent a number of years ago, actually a couple of years ago, almost to the date, when I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. And I can tell you the support that comes out of this organization for men who are going through this ordeal is incredible. We all get a package, an information package, and I was a little surprised when I saw you coming here, and just wanted to say that one, I don't ride a Harley, like many of us don't ride Harleys, and I really hope that I'm glad to see you're bringing it to Langley. Hopefully, thank you.
Councillor Pratt?
Thank you, Your Worship, and just I want to say thank you for being here today. And to Councillor Ferguson's point, was pleased to welcome the 3rd CAV for their ride down through the walk to remember there a few times now. And I guess through yourself, Your Worship, to staff, or maybe you can answer the question.
We'll just deal with the delegation first, and then if you want to discuss it with staff after, we can.
Well, no, I'm just curious what would be the step forward from here,
Yeah,
because
so we can, if you have any questions for the delegation, we can get through that process first, and then we can debate it as a council.
kind of like everybody else, no questions.
Okay, great. So thank you for your delegation, and I think what I'm hearing is generally we're supportive, maybe with some public consultation and some consideration of some of the impacts, but generally I think very supportive of the cause and obviously very supportive of the event.
Perfect, thank you.
Councillor Pratt, come back to you. Do you have any?
Yeah, through yourself to staff, what's the step that you need from us in order to expedite this or to have it on your priority list? Because I know that if it comes to council, then usually it means that you need some direction.
No, Mr. Backen, if there was a desire to see council be generally supportive, subject to some concerns, if that threshold has been met, then staff can interface or get back to the delegate on a process to apply and see the event move forward. Is that you want to?
That's correct. We're just looking for the general flavor of council to see that this is something that interests them.
So do you have another question, or we can?
Nope.
Is that good? Yeah. So I think that Mr. Backen, you take it under direction to follow up about the process to apply, and if there's any issues with that, please feel free to contact my office. Okay. Thanks. Move on to presentation D1, Langley RCMP. Superintendent Marsden, great to have you here.
Thank you.
Please go ahead.
All right. Well, good afternoon. Thanks very much for having me, Your Worship and councillors. I think it's my first presentation in front of the new council, so firstly, congratulations to all of you for your successes. I think I've met most of you except for a couple, so pleasure to meet you, and hopefully I'll get to meet you in some of the events moving forward. If I haven't, my name is Adrian Marsden, and I've been the officer in charge of the Langley RCMP detachment for coming up on 2 years in June. I really like it here, and I'd kind of like to stay, so to that end, I've tried to prepare a report for you just to give you some accountability for what we're doing and let you know what we've done over the last quarter. So I took a bit of a shot in the dark, seeing it's a new group, so hopefully this is what you'd like to see, but as we move forward, please feel free to provide input back to me by way of emails or whatever you'd like to see as we move along, and in the years to come, hopefully I'm doing what you like. So essentially, I've broken the sit down into a number of different categories. Starting off, I'm talking a bit about persons and violent crimes. I've grabbed some statistics from our PRIME database, which is essentially our database for calls. So these would be the top 10 type of calls that are plainclothes and our uniform members would be attending on a day-to-day basis that you probably wouldn't hear about so much in the media, but this is the sorts of calls that we're attending regularly. For each of these categories, I've provided you the stats, and I guess overall this is sort of somewhat of a document for you to take with you and read at your leisure, but I'll kind of hit the highlights over the next 15 minutes for you. And for each topic, I've also provided a crime map just to give you some indication where the kind of hot spots are for the various offenses. In terms of persons of violent crime over the last 3 months, it's actually been, knock on wood, relatively quiet, and I probably just cursed it by saying that. But in terms of very serious offenses, notably homicides or what have you, it's been actually relatively quiet in Langley. Of course, we had the awful shooting in July with the involving the homeless persons, but since then we've had one murder in October, but besides that, we actually haven't had any, which is actually quite rare. So it did allow us to do a few other things, and a couple of kind of notable projects in this area is one that we did get information about a group that had committed a shooting in another area. So we're always kind of looking for problem residences to alleviate problems from, and so we worked in one house in the Brookswood area, and as a result of investigation, we ended up seizing about $10,000 of proceeds of crime and a quantity of crystal meth and some body armor, and worked closely with Township Bylaws on that file. And another kind of notable thing we did over the last 3 months was we worked closely with the Combined Forces Special Enforcement Team, which is essentially the gang task force for the province. We worked with them for 3 weeks, tried to do sort of a high visibility, high profile project, really focusing on any gang activity or known gang associates that we might have in the area and try to discourage any of that activity in Langley. And working with them, we did a project that was focused in Langley, Surrey, Coquitlam, and Vancouver. And about a quarter of the charges that we got out of it were from Langley. So we consider it figured it was a pretty effective project by our standards. Another area I wanted to talk about is, I guess I'll refer to as the vulnerable sector. So we try to do a lot of work with mental health and other vulnerable people in our population, people that are drug addicted, and we tend to encounter homeless individuals quite a bit just in the nature of our day-to-day duties. So to that end, we have a 3-member mental health unit, and the purpose of that unit is essentially to be more effective in dealing with mental health patients. So kind of develop some specialty in our ability to deal with them, that we're trying to, I guess, glean off the medical workers that we work with, and then also build up some of our relationships with the hospitals so that we can process people through when we need them dealt with or come to our care. So right now, the mental health team has about 13 cases that they're working with. To that end, they currently work with the ACT team. I don't know if you hear about this on other delegations presenting to you, but this is the Assertive Community Treatment Team. So it's a team of mostly medical professionals that are working to support people with mental health issues and work to try to get them long-term solutions and get them into more stable lifestyles. And so we work a lot with them. They often, if they come to our attention through policing incidents, we try to work with them to try to get them back on track. Other initiatives that we have going on, probably over the time that I've been there, we've tried very hard to get a mental health car. So other jurisdictions have this, and it's basically the idea is that we work with a police officer and a forensic health nurse, and makes us hopefully more effective in dealing with mental health patients when we're often arresting them under the Mental Health Act or what have you. So we tried hard to get that going as a full-time thing. So it's been a bit of a struggle at higher levels trying to get a MOU signed with Fraser Health itself, but at a ground working level, we've been fairly effective. We do work with Fraser Health and other nurses about 8 hours a week. We designed a police car for mental health patients, which makes the rides, we believe, safer to the hospitals and allows for more care and safety for the health workers that we work with. So that's one thing that we have continuing, and hopefully I'll report good things about that in the years to come. Another thing we started off is we gathered funding for what's called a situation table. So essentially what happens there is if you have people come out from other social services agencies or through policing incidents, we work as a team with other social services agencies and other groups to, again, try to find long-term solutions for people that are coming to our attention. So in this particular case, we would have members of the Ministry of Children and Families. We would have, mental health professionals, nurses, and we have a contingent from the Indigenous community, and a variety of other kind of social groups, and we just try to get together. We'll analyze each person that comes before us and try to develop a program to deal with that person on long-term, focusing long-term. And then the last thing is we started a project to deal with people that are in danger of overdosing and dying. So we started handing out naloxone kits. So for people that we do encounter with that condition, when they're leaving our cells, we'll provide them naloxone kits to take with them in hopes that they wouldn't overdose later. And then we've also provided it to our officers on the street just to be able to provide to people that they're encountering to, again, just to hopefully keep them alive. Another unit I wanted to talk about was the school resource unit. This, again, a unit that's, I think does a lot of good work. They've done a lot of outreach with some of the kids in some of the schools here. So for instance, just to run through a few of them, at Parkside Elementary, we do have some of our male officers meeting with a high-risk group of youths, males, 10 to 12 years old. And just essentially trying to engage them in a positive, as positive role models and in positive situations and offer them supports where we can, and usually in relation to sporting or kind of food events that we'll set up. Other initiatives that we've done is we've had our liaison officers do consent talks at Walnut Grove Secondary. And this is really talking about sexual consent and to avoid any problems both on the male and female sides in understanding exactly what that means to avoid problems later. We are currently setting up a cadet camp, so for July 4th to the 6th. And so we did this last year, and it's basically we have about 50 kids come in, and for 3 days we kind of run a youth camp. So we'll take them through, a lot of it's kind of police related, so we'll set up scenarios for them to observe, and then we'll bring in different facets of policing. We're bringing the police dogs, we'll land the police helicopter for them. We do forensic identification, so like the CSI people, we'll do a presentation for them and just kind of take them through a few things, and then we'll run some sporting events and stuff for them for the 3 days. And similarly, we have a girls groups at Poppy, Stafford, and Fundamental Secondary. And then we started another program called the Step Beyond program, which essentially takes kids out into the community to kind of learn about different facets of it. So we actually took them, a contingent of them out to us, and we took them around the detachment just to show them what we do. And then the next one's actually the Gateway of Hope, interestingly. We're taking them, we're hoping to take them there and take them around to the staff and show them what they do. And we're hoping to have actually a resident talk to the kids just to kind of understand, what the kind of threats are, I guess, in that you can fall into and avoid those sort of situations. And then, of course, the school liaisons are always attending prep rallies, assemblies, and what have you. And then the last thing is they do a number of what we call VTRAs, but they're violence threat risk assessments. So if we have a threat at a school in relation to a student or anything like that, a threat of a bomb threat or a shooting or something like that, we'll sit down with the staff and make sure that it gets worked out, and we do a threat assessment and deal with it. So over the last 3 months, we had 14 of those in the township and 1 in the city. Another thing I've tried to encourage has been a lot of foot patrols and bike patrols. A lot of this has to do with for sure the vulnerable sector and dealing with regular homeless people, but also try to respond to some of the complaints from the business community and essentially, again, just working to try to get people off the streets long term. I should point out that there's a couple of zeros, but those are wrong. I don't think some of my members knew I was going to ask for those stats, so they haven't been recording them right. But so I can say we've done them in every area of Langley, but and those numbers will be going up in the next 3 months. The traffic, December was it's called Light Up the Highway month, and so we did a combined project in the Lower Mainland with ICBC, and the focus of that was impaired driving. So we laid 82 charges in relation to that. So it was everything, well, I shouldn't say charges, everything from license suspension to criminal code charges. Langley actually had an inordinate number of fatalities over the last 3 months. We actually tied with Surrey for 4. So in that end, we found that most of the deaths were caused by excessive speeding. So I tried to increase that. So we did lay 216 speeding charges and then 29 excessive speeding charges. Other areas that we are always looking at, and again, I won't go through all now, but are property crime and business crimes. So just for your interest, these are kind of the top offenses that we're seeing in Langley in relation to property crime. And again, I have a map for you there you can look at. And business crime, similarly, the types of files that we're seeing there. Again, a map for you. And just to brush over some of the things we've done in relation to property and business crime quickly. Our community liaison officers have been out doing what we call CEPTED, so crime prevention through environmental design. So that is basically a request from the business owners to go over their business and try to do what we can to increase the security and minimize their chances of break-ins. So we'll kind of do a walk around the property and try to lessen their chances of getting broken into or having items stolen. I did encourage more foot patrols in Brookswood, Willoughby, and Walnut Grove, again, mostly in responses to requests from the business community. Catalytic converters, they're really an epidemic of thefts across almost everywhere, but certainly here. So in working against that, we did actually target one group and ended up laying charges against that group, and it happened to be from Edmonton, so they did actually move, and so we consider that a minor success. The next thing we did, we also had information from the Abbotsford Police Department about a group that was doing a number of break-and-enters, vehicle thefts, theft from autos, and business thefts. So we worked on that group as well over the last 3 months and laid 22 charges in that. For things that occurred in Abbotsford, Surrey, and Langley. And then last couple things are that the Royal Bank was having a number of break-ins, including one in Langley here where they had $100,000 stolen from an ATM. So we investigated that and laid charges against the suspect. And then currently we have a large theft of off-road vehicles that we're currently working on. Other stats to throw out for you, these are our prisoner counts for last year, just so you know we are doing something. And the community police offices, I know that there's lots of talk about that. I know COVID's over, so we'd like to see those open. Of course, we have the grand opening of the North Langley CPO on Wednesday, and that's going to be open Monday to Thursday, 8 to 4:30. The Aldergrove CPO, we're working hard to try to get that open and staffed. We have staffing interviews on March the 6th. And then just for your info, where your money's going, we are required under the provincial policing agreement to provide members to CIRG, or the Community Industry Response Group, which is essentially all the police departments in the province have to provide a certain number of officers to essentially guard the pipeline developments. So just to make sure that they're peaceful. So over the last 3 months, we have been providing some members to Houston to guard the Coastal GasLink pipeline. Last couple of things, online reporting. So we did set up, we've had this for a while, the online reporting system. So just to make it easier for residents to be able to report offenses if they don't need a police officer to attend. So particularly if they get broken into and they just need a file number, for instance, for their insurance or what have you, they can just go onto the internet and log in and get a file number. Just saves them waiting online for the non-emergency line. Detachment resources. Generally speaking, like everywhere in Canada, we're struggling with recruiting, I think it's fair to say. But we ourselves, Langley is actually doing fairly well, I think. We have 210 positions and currently have 215 people filling them just because of transfers not working out exactly to the date. Of that, we do have 34 vacancies, I'll call them, but it's basically, we always sit with about 10 to 15% under, just to do with illnesses, paternity, maternity, suspended or seconded or returning to work from injuries. So right now we sit at about 34, which is around 12%, which is by RCMP standards is very good, actually. So it's we're probably one of the better detachments in Canada, I think, for that. And then just the last part, I won't go through it, but I did just provide the methodology for the analysis in case you're super interested in statistics. And that's about it. There you go. If you have any questions or you want to email me later.
No, there are questions from council. I have one. If you could go back to the second slide.
Okay.
Might want to use the arrows. That's going to be pretty painful. There we go. One of the very first stats slide, right after the first slide. Keep going. No, right after the first slide, the second slide. Yeah, keep going. That's 6. Keep going. There we go. 6. There we go. 6. Sorry.
Oh, 6.
6. 6, which is actually number 2. No, that one there. Sorry, no, the one with all the numbers on it.
Oh, this one.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay. So a lot of the slides sort of reinforce the same trend, plus or minus. But here I did some quick math here by looking at this. So if the Township of Langley is 85% of the population, it seems Langley City is generating 30% of the calls on this slide. Do I have the math roughly correct there? I think I do. But what's your commentary on that if we're 85% of the population, we're paying for 85% of the members? I think it's actually more than that. What do we do about the fact that we're sharing an attachment with another municipality that's generating that disparity in calls versus the population? Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously with the proposal that, you would separate, I certainly understand that. That's, certainly you would allow you more focus on the calls in the township. And it's just going against the old philosophy is where you had everybody together and you could sort of use the resources to flow in a certain direction if you wanted to, depending on what you consider priorities. I guess that's the
that's a challenge that you face, I think, operating a joint detachment. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So can you go to the slide that showed the foot patrols? I forget the number. I didn't have a chance to write that down.
Number 12.
That one there. There we go. So I added it up quickly. That was 100 for the township and 209 for the city. Does that sound about right?
Yeah.
What's the process for that? So if we have 85% of the population, why wouldn't we get 85% of the foot patrols?
Yeah, no, it's for sure we'll certainly flow our resources to where we see the problems at the time. And so that's for sure.
So this indicates that a lot of the problems are in the city? Is that?
For sure, no question that would, for foot patrols, we concentrate a lot in the city.
Again, this is a challenge. This is a challenge you're facing running an integrated detachment where we have a disparity in population this significant, but also a disparity in the challenges you're facing from a crime point of view?
Yes.
Yes. I have one other question. Do you need more members?
Yes, we could always use more members.
That's great, thank you. Councillor Richter, go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. A lot of good information. Thank you for sharing it. I have several questions here, but I just want to pick up on a question that was just asked, sort of. In your opinion, is separating the township and the city helpful or hurtful for policing?
You know, I don't want, myself, if I could avoid it, I'd avoid the politics. And I think, you know, I would always try to support whatever you wanted. I can certainly see the benefits to doing it. You know, my understanding of the benefits of doing it is that you would want to avoid the administration involved in having two councils, and then I think the extra work that would bring, and possibly the inefficiency that might bring. So I certainly understand that argument. And then also you would have the be able to focus on what you have without the distraction of another, you know, community, no matter what it is. So I certainly get that. If I was, you know, that's against, you know, the past argument of you know, the benefit is having you just have more people to work with, but whether those resources are going to where you want to see them is the big question. And it's really so like we've said, you know, that the challenges would be for me is to kind of making sure that they're going in the right area, and that I guess that's kind of for you to determine is, are they going where you want them to, or, and if they are, I guess that's good, and if they aren't, then I guess that's bad, and that's
Well, I guess where
yeah.
I'm coming from on this is for as long as I've lived in Langley, which is 35 plus years, that we've always had a joint attachment.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking in terms of the actual members, are they happy about the decision that we want to separate or not happy? Like, because it's a big change for them. It's
Yeah.
they've been working together for a long time, and now they're going to be separated.
Honestly, I honestly think that for the most part, I think most of the members would support either. I think you know, whatever you know, we're asked to do, we'll provide as best we can, and if that meant a detachment together, we would do it, and if it was a detachment separated, we would do that too. I don't think. I honestly think that for the most part, the members are coming to work, and if they're enjoying what they're doing, and I think they could in both scenarios, that I don't think it, my personal feeling is that I don't think it would have a huge impact.
Okay. Now, the last council approved 10 new RCMP officers. Were we able to fill all those positions?
Yes.
We were, but we still have 21 vacancies.
Well, we don't have any vacancies. We only have people that are not at work for other reasons. So the spots are filled. It's just some people are sick, or some people are off for personal reasons, or maternity, paternity, those things. Like all the spots are actually occupied.
And I remember your predecessor coming to council and stating the business case for why he needed 10 more people at that time. Now, this council has approved 15 new people, but do we have a business case as to why 15 is the magic number here?
To be honest, I haven't been asked for one, but I can certainly provide one.
Okay. The question about gangs, the CFSEU. In previous councils, council has received a closed briefing on gang activity. Can we get that again? Because I think we need it, and we need to have a better understanding, and certainly the public is quite concerned about gang activity.
I can try.
You can try. Okay. So what can we do to help make your trying happen?
So I know you had that because I set it up. It was a bit of a special request to get it done. I don't think it's a normal thing they would come to council and do that. But I think they should, frankly. And so I guess for now, leave it with me. And I will try to make that happen. But I guess to answer your question, I think these are probably good things to bring up, you know, because I think the mayor's the meetings you have with the mayors are a bit higher level than me, and so those are the times maybe to bring those up is things you'd like to see. Yeah, and that's when you're sort of talking to the higher.
Well, except that the people who are elected in the community are the ones who end up with the front lines. Why is this happening here?
Yeah.
And we have no answers.
No, I'm just
We need to
answering.
have
I'm answering
answers.
your question
Yeah.
as to how you could help me,
Yeah.
and that's how you could help me. It would be
Okay.
you could at the mayor's forums you could bring that up as something you'd like to see, and I could get somebody in to talk to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, going back to the foot patrols, that slide, how come we have so few foot patrols in Aldergrove?
You actually, as I was saying, they're actually higher than that. But the reason the stats right now are a bit low is because mostly because of the election. So I had been reporting every quarter to half a year, but because we hadn't been reporting, I don't think we'd been maintaining our stats properly. But so those will increase.
Those will increase,
Yeah.
okay. And the brand-new CPO that's opening this week, which the previous council spent a lot of money on, how come it's only going to be open 4 days a week?
I think part of it had to do with the, don't quote me, well, I believe it has to do with the contractual arrangement for the employees that are the municipal employees that are working in it. I think they have a certain number of shifts and hours that they have to work. So it has to be, that's why it's not 5 as opposed to 4.
So we're spending, and I know this is not your problem, it's our problem, but we're spending a lot of money on that particular office, and it's only going to be open 4 days a week because of contractual arrangements with municipal employees.
That is my understanding why there's the 4-day shift versus the 5, but yeah.
Okay. You mentioned VTRAs, and Township in the last 3 months had 14, the city only had 1. Is this normal or abnormal or lower than normal?
I don't think I could. I don't think any stats are normal, to be honest. Like when I report in 3 months, they'll be different, and I don't know if there's. I don't know if I could point at concrete reasons why they change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And the other question that I have, and this is one that's come to my attention recently, is the number of, or the practice of putting people who do have a tendency towards disruptive behavior in a home in suburban areas. And this presents problems for the neighbors because of the person's violent tendencies. Is this increasing in the township, and why is it increasing?
Well, I think it's that situation may be. I don't know if it's increasing. That's not my line of business. That would be more to do with a social service agency that deals with dealing with situations like that. So I don't know what the stats would be or where they're living. It's certainly not an uncommon call to get a residence in the area that would be generating calls for us in that regard. And I think it's more that I think there is. This is more the approach now in dealing with drug addiction, mental illness, and what have you. I think it's to try to treat it in a more social manner as opposed to just arresting people. And I think it's more. So I think you probably are seeing more of approach in that way. So these houses probably, I would think that approach to dealing with mental illness or drug addiction is becoming more popular.
Okay. And do you keep stats on that right now, like the number of calls that you go out to? And where I'm coming from on this is the residents who I'm hearing from have a right to feel safe in their neighborhoods. And I think they have a right to expect somebody's gonna look out for their safety. Because their safety is as important as the safety of these people who are being housed in the neighborhoods. And I think it's probably the police's job to make sure that the neighbors are as safe as the individual is safe.
Yeah.
So can we get stats on that going forward? Like how many of these homes do we have? How many call outs do you get weekly or monthly for these particular homes?
Yeah, I could provide, I think I could provide stats with, it's not that easy, but I could probably provide general stats on that, on those type of calls. Yeah.
Okay, so I'd like to make a request now that we get that in your next report.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Kuntz.
Hi, thank you for coming. You mentioned catalytic converter theft. Are there any jurisdictions that have any success in curbing catalytic converter theft because there's maybe a good policy around? I mean, I see different things on the news from time to time. People have these ideas, oh, you know, you should do this, you should do that. Is there anything out there to help you with this?
It is a very challenging thing to investigate. Probably the trickiest part of it, if I'm being frank, is that the catalytic converters themselves aren't marked very well. So trying to prove that they're stolen is very tricky. And so that is what makes,
So
makes it a very
there
difficult
is
crime.
nothing out there that could help.
So it's, you need a lot of evidence, frankly, to,
Right.
you know, to prosecute a charge even when you catch people with it. So that's the challenge. Yeah. I wouldn't say there's any jurisdiction that's doing it, that I've heard that's doing it exceptionally better than anywhere else.
Okay. You mentioned something about prisoners. Does Langley have prisoners? I mean, like, do we house prisoners?
Yes.
Oh, boy, did not know that. In the detachment?
Yes.
Yes.
Like, for a long time? Like, they're there for a long time?
No. Usually,
Okay.
so we.
How does that work? I just need to know this.
Yeah. No, we. So typically, the longest typically we'll hold them for is over the weekend.
Okay,
And then they
okay.
get sent to Surrey pretrial or one
Okay.
of the pretrial centers.
Okay. Just lastly, I just want to thank you, your team, your staff for the work that you do in our community. It's not easy, even coming to council and having to answer hard questions. I just want to thank you for keeping our community safe.
Thank you.
My understanding, you do not want to end up in prisoner situation on Thursday prior to Thanksgiving weekend. Would that be fair?
Probably.
Probably. And I do remember when I did a tour of the cells there, that I saw the fridge where the food is, or the freezer where the food is kept, and wasn't a lot of variety from
What is the capacity to house prisoners in?
I wouldn't know offhand, but I mean, I'm, just guessing. I would say certainly like 50.
Oh, okay. I thought you said, like, I saw 993. I'm like, whoa, that's a lot of people.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Pratt, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for being here and for the presentation and for what you do. A couple questions. One, in regard to kind of the trends that you see in general, specifically for the township. Are there any kind of long-term concerning trends or positive trends that you've seen in our community that are something we can build on, or things that we should be aware of?
Yeah, I mean, just, property crime is always a problem. Definitely, homelessness is a problem all across the community. I think, but it's, definitely something we need to focus on in the years to come. And then, a lot of lower level street crime just to do with, car thefts and break into vehicles.
Right.
Like everywhere in the Lower Mainland, we just kind of have the same problems.
And I guess to that point, the numbers that we see, city versus township, are they kind of representative or similar to what levels of crime you'd see in communities of the same size across the Lower Mainlands? Because cities close to Port Moody in size, we're close to Coquitlam or something like that. Are they similar in that regard?
Yes.
Okay. And then again, kind of just thinking forward. Obviously, when density goes up and sheer number of people goes up in an area, crime just
Yep.
goes up. As we are building out a neighborhood, especially in Willoughby, as kind of a city unto itself, are we seeing trends in that regard of raw numbers and per capita numbers in Willoughby going up? And are there things that we can be doing to improve that as we still are building?
Yeah, I definitely think that, population and policing demands tend to match each other. And I think there's probably, I think with the incoming SkyTrains, for instance, I think that's going to require like more policing. So yeah, I do think, with further development, you will require more policing in the years to come.
So are we kind of the school programs that you mentioned that we're doing in others, are there plans to go into the Willoughby schools as they open to do some of these boys and girls programs?
Oh, they do. We do.
They do
now.
already?
Yeah, yeah.
Amazing. Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Councilor Van Popte.
Yeah, thanks for coming. Kind of one comment and one question. Regarding the cadet program, so that you've only done it the 1 year or the first year?
So I think it's been, we did it last year, and I think we've done it most years. I think it probably stopped from COVID.
Okay.
Somewhere in there.
I just really wish it was around when I was a kid because,
okay.
I'm really happy to see that is a program. Is it well attended? Is it something that you could actually increase to get more kids interested in policing?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, it's their kids are quite young. I mean, so I think it was like most of the kids were like around grade 7.
Yeah. No. I would have eaten that up had that opportunity been available when I was a kid. I noticed that, sexual violent crimes is, in the top 4 of crimes. And it really actually saddens me that, in today's society that we're still facing those kind of crimes. Is that typically where it stands in most municipalities, in that kind of ranking as the 4th top crime? What are the things that you think that we could do to, what are things that society or even, us as at this table can help curb those numbers?
That's a loaded question. So a number of the offenses, so one thing is, you have talked about extra members. So one thing that I'd really like to see actually is a dedicated vulnerable persons unit. Like I'd actually like to see a unit focus on child porn. Unfortunately, that is quite a rampant thing. And as well as developing expertise into like child interviewing and kind of be specialized in the law of sexual offenses, which are kind of complicated because legally. So I think developing those specialties, and then I think really some of the things we're doing now. I think just educating young people as to avoiding situations where they're going to get themselves into trouble. Off the top of my head, that's kind of what I think. Yeah.
I just want to commend your detachment on the handling of somebody that I know in regards to sexual violent crime or sexual crime in general. And, from all intents and purposes, I heard that it was handled very well and the victim felt very well supported. So.
Thank you.
Councilor Martins.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for being here. Thank you for your presentation. This is excellent information. A couple of points I want to make that you don't need to respond to is just I'm hearing the word separate detachments, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. It's not a separation, it's a deintegration. They are very different things. Surrey is seeing a separation, potentially not. That's still on the table, where there's other jurisdictions where they are deintegrating. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. The other comment I had, it's interesting with regards to the catalytic converter thefts. It reminds me of in the 90s, Surrey was the car theft capital of Canada. If you had a Honda, it was usually stolen. And that trend changed when the industry started installing the immobilizers in vehicles and that sort of thing, and it decreased the car theft numbers incredibly. Yep. And I feel like that maybe is where this needs to go. It's not so much of a policing enforcement. I appreciate the difficulties in the getting charges to Crown, that if maybe the industry, and that's going to take years, looks at a way of marking them, making them, the actual numbers attached to a vehicle like a VIN. That's kind of what I see where that needs to go. Because right now you guys are doing the best you can, but it is really difficult, and I understand the problem with the charges. The other thing I wanted to say, I really appreciate that you're reopening the community police offices, and thank you for that and for your efforts. I went on a ride along with Constable Mann a couple weeks ago and went to the North Langley office. And what I wanted to make sure was expressed is, yes, the office is open to the public 4 days a week, but there's actually work going on from that office more than that. My understanding is the traffic section for all of Langley is working out of that office. So there, even though it might not be available for people doing prints and stuff like that, there's still a lot of good work happening most days, right?
Absolutely. Actually, I should say that. Yeah, all our officers work out of those offices, so that's another benefit besides just the public being able to attend them. All our officers are actually working out of these offices, so it cuts down our responses times. So the North Langley CPO, for instance, will have the community liaison officers working out of it. The traffic, the general duty uniform members will probably work out of it once they left the detachment in the beginning of their shifts. So yeah, there are lots of benefits to that.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I appreciate you putting this report together and the statistics, and the Langley RCMP is doing a lot of really good work, and you don't always get credit, for some of these initiatives. So I appreciate it being highlighted with regards to the vulnerable sector and that sort of thing. It's awesome. And there was one more comment I had here. I just got to find my notes. When we're looking at the disparity between the city and the township, a lot of that I'm assuming is driven by calls for service that draw the resources out of the township into the city that can create, as opposed to where you're putting members, where you're deploying them.
Yes.
The calls for service drive that disparity.
Yes.
Okay. And then the last thing I just wanted to say, what I also find interesting is a slide that you had about the business crime trends. There are a lot of calls for service that aren't crime. You've got suspicious occurrences, you've got municipal bylaws, unspecified, other, those sorts of things. The police do a lot of work that is not captured by a crime stat. And I just wanted to mention that and highlight that, and thank you for that, because it's not always an arrest. So,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson?
Yeah, Superintendent Marston, thank you for coming. It was very, very, most of the questions have been answered, very, very helpful for you coming today. I know I've had some break-ins, and your staff have been professional, helpful, and very supportive, and that's nice to know, and that you can compliment your folks there for that. It's been mentioned again by a couple of my colleagues, the serial numbers for those, what they call those catalytic converters taken off, that's been talked about for a while. I'm not sure if some vehicle have any. I think Canadian Tire and other, they'll actually put a serial number on. Now, obviously, folks are going to want to grind those off. But my question to you, if you get them or get to the recyclers or something, is there anything you can do?
Yeah, we do get, it's just difficult. But yeah, we do. We have had charges in some cases. It's just tricky not being able to match the converter to the car. So it just requires a lot of extra evidence usually. So we're occasionally successful. It's just tough. Yeah.
And a little bit of, and I'm going to now go back to the VTRA, violent, the city versus the township. Well, okay, retired teacher. I used to teach high school. There are no high schools in the city of Langley. So where we explore, and I think many of those, I was in another jurisdiction teaching, many of those statistics might have been my students. But anyway, I just say they have cars, They have older brothers and older friends and siblings. And when you're 17 years of age, you have a whole different world than at 11 or 12. And I remember talking to one of my parents. I said, I understand you got your son a car. I said, yeah, it was a Shelby. Okay, and so he's driving around with a Shelby and doing whatever else he wants to do. And the reality, people of that age tend to be a little violent incidents. They're not necessarily convicted of crimes or something, but it's an incident that happens in schools and usually high schools. So I wanted to point that out. Back to, I need my glasses now. You know, as the Langleys grow older, you know, and larger, Langley City and Langley Town, I'm not going to ask you a comment on that, and that wouldn't be quite fair, is the metropolises grow larger. And we have things like SkyTrain coming into our communities. We have an ambitious community plans coming into community. More people, more services will be demanded, as been talked about before. So that kind of sets the pace for discussions on what do we do as we grow larger in metropolises, and how do we serve our communities based on that. Now, 20 years ago when I was elected or first elected, that wasn't necessarily the case. A lot less people. There were a lot less people wandering around, and I won't classify or stereotype that, and causing concerns. And as those metropolises build, we have to, I guess, deliver different services per communities. And they, in each of those communities, develop their own unique policing methodology. It doesn't change the fact that it's RCMP, but policing methodologies. So I really want to thank you for your service. And my last question to you, you're relatively a newcomer to Langley, so how are you finding, if I may?
Oh, it's awesome. Yeah. Loving it.
Good to hear that. Thank you very much.
Okay, seeing no other questions from council, I'm going to say, you know, a comment was made about wanting to see more of our residents feel safe in their communities. Would more members help you with that?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I want to thank you again for your presentation here. I think this is great to get this update to council directly and hear the questions and also hear your responses as well. And then please pass on to all the members how much we appreciate the work they're doing every day for the residents
thank
of
you.
Langley. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. It's going to move on to reports to council. E1. Turn off that microphone. There we go. E1, UBCM Poverty Reduction Planning and Action Program Grant. Get a motion, please. Actually, I'm going to get a motion to receive the presentation since it's in the agenda. Why don't we just do that? Moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Van Popta. All those in favor of receive the presentation? Carries unanimously. So again, get a motion, please, on E1. Moved by Councillor Pratt, seconded by Councillor Van Popta. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question on E1. That carries unanimously. We'll move on to E2, Fire Hall Feasibility Studies Report. Get a motion to receive. Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Bailey. All those in favor of receipt, just raise your hands. Anyone opposed to receipt? Seeing none, that carries unanimously. Any questions? Councillor Richter.
Yeah, why would we receive it before we got our questions answered?
Well, we can do the questions. We're going to receive it regardless, I would assume.
Okay, I was just wondering, the firm that was chosen to do this study, was there an open bid on that?
Mr. Bracken.
As I recall, there was, Your Worship. It goes well back into the last term when we started the process to evaluate some of the fire hall locations, and this firm actually had the qualifications and expertise to deal with the matter because they had previous experience in the field.
Councillor Kunst.
Does this number include property, acquiring property?
Mr. Bracken, my understanding the reports were contemplating replacement on the existing sites. Is that correct?
That's correct. When you're looking at the numbers for the fire halls, you're looking at the construction costs and not the land costs.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no other questions, we'll move on to E3, intersection of Fraser Highway at 272 update. Get a motion, please. Moved by Councillor Pratt, seconded by Councillor Martins. Is there any discussion on E3? Councillor Martins, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to acknowledge Myrtle Clift, who delegated to us in November about this concern, and I appreciate her bringing it forward. And I also appreciate staff responding to it so quickly with our questions about the collision data and the traffic analysis. I support this and I appreciate this initiative because public safety, it's most important.
Great, thanks. Seeing no other discussion, I'll call the question on E3. That carries unanimously. Moving on to E4, sanitary sewer local area service, 28th Avenue and 206th Street. Get a motion, please. Moved by Councillor Pratt. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Van Popta. Is there any discussion on E4? Seeing none, I'll call the question on E4. That fails with Councillor Bailey, Councillor Rent, Mayor Woodward, Councillor Martins, Councillor Van Popta, and Councillor Ferguson opposed. Move on to F1 bylaws for first and second reading. Streamside protection and enhancement clarification amendments. I'll move that. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Van Popta. Is there any discussion? F1. Councillor Richter.
Yes, I would like to know, and I'm glad this is going out for a public hearing, so the public will have input into it. But I want to know if this will apply to the Gloucester area.
Mr. Backen, Mr. Richardson.
Through your worship to Councillor Richter, yes, it will apply township-wide.
It will apply township-wide. So the outdated provisions that are currently in place in Gloucester for development there will be replaced by what comes in under this?
Mr. Backen or Mr. Richardson, go ahead.
Through your worship to Councillor Richter, yeah, I think that item was the same inquiry from Ms. Weens that I was able to respond to earlier on. Staff consider the referred item, which is a letter from DFO, to be no longer valid in terms of those applicabilities in Gloucester. So the intent of the amendments here is to provide some more further clarification with respect to those types of items and in its administration internally and externally.
Okay. And do we know when the public hearing will be on this so that, because I know there's a great deal of interest about improving what's been happening in Gloucester lately. So when will the public hearing be held, approximately? I know
Backen,
you
are we gonna make March 13th for that, or is it gonna go to April?
We would plan on having it for March 13th. We generally have a 2-week rotation.
Okay, that'd be great if we can do that.
March 13th. Okay, thank you very much.
Great. Seeing no other discussion, I'll call the question on F1. That carries unanimously. Just before we move on to G1, Ms. Bauer, can you clear our screens of the foot patrol item? That's great, thank you. It's a bit distracting. Okay, let's move on to G1, general bylaws for first, second, and third reading. General local government election bylaw amendment, bylaw number 5846. Get a motion, please. Moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Bailey. Discussion, Councillor Richter.
Yes, I'm wondering how come we want to drop any reference to the addresses of candidates. Why would candidates be hesitant to have their addresses revealed?
Mr. Backen or Ms. Bauer, you want to on the rationale for this?
The amendment was done at the request of council. There was a notice of motion earlier to do that. We are removing the candidate's address simply from the web version that's posted, so just a little bit more privacy for people. They still will be on the version that's here, that legally we have to, people can come see, as well as the information that's provided to Elections BC.
So that people in the public can ask and find out if people who are running for council in the further elections do in fact live in the township? Because I think that's the
we would still have people registered as living in the township. If you'll notice on that one, we're going to replace it with their neighborhood. So if the neighborhood wasn't in the township, we would definitely, that would still show on the forms. We're just going to take that out. And the actual nomination papers are available for people to come see here. It's just the web version that we're not.
Okay, and the other question that I had is, can we send this for public input?
Bauer, I presume that we can send anything for public input.
It's council's direction whether it would go for public input, yes.
Okay, then I'd like to make a motion or an amendment, whatever,
think that would be a referral for public input, would that be?
A referral or a
What form of public input would you like to?
Well, I
would you like
guess
to
it
see?
would be a public input opportunity. Can we have that on March 13th as well?
Unfortunately not. Well, we anticipate ads going forward on things that will need public hearing, and they're already done, and we just have to push the button. In this case, we wouldn't have it ready to go.
Okay.
So that would be an April 3rd probably at this
Likely.
point. Do you wish to make that motion, Councillor
Yes,
Richter?
I do.
Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Kuntz. I'll open up. Is there any discussion on the referral? Seeing none, I'll call the question on the referral of G1. That fails with Councillor Bailey, Councillor Rent, Mayor Woodward, Councillor Martins, Councillor Van Popte, Councillor Pratt opposed. Back to the main motion. Councillor Richter, do you have anything else?
No, that's fine.
Okay, so seeing no other discussion, I'll call the question on G1. That carries unanimously. Moving on to G2, election and political science bylaw number 5834. Get a motion, please. Moved by Councillor Bailey, seconded by Councillor Martins. Councillor Richter, go ahead.
Yes, I think this does need to go for public input, so I'd like to make a referral for a public input opportunity in April.
Okay, I'll come back to you. Councillor Kuntz, go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a question. So it says on one of the lines there, bylaw, 1 sign per candidate, 1 sign per political organization can be placed on private property. Does that mean that it's 2 signs per property, or is this an either-or situation?
Mr. Bracken, do you have an interpretation of that?
At this point, it would be 2 signs,
Okay, so it wouldn't be...
multiples of.
Okay, so if we have another situation where we have a slate that has 5, 6, 7 people running.
In that case, it would be the electoral organization plus each of the candidates, should they choose.
Plus each of the candidates?
Yeah.
So they could
So-
have actually 7 signs from each?
Yeah, because what we've done is we've said any candidate, for any candidate you wish to support, otherwise people may not be able to support 1 or 2 candidates.
Okay, I guess the other question that I would like people, maybe this is be a good thing for the public if we do get that opportunity. If a property owner wants 57,052 signs, if it's private property, maybe we should just allow them to do that. I don't know. That's just my thing. And if we have a very, very large property and there's only 2 signs or something, or 1 sign, I don't know. These are just some of the questions that I had. So. Thank you.
Great. Councillor Richter, you want to make that referral?
Yes, I'd like to refer this for public input in April.
Let's open up a second. Sorry. Public input on April 3rd. Do you mind if we specify a date?
Sure.
Okay. Is there a seconder to that?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councillor Kuntz. Is there any discussion on that? So I'm going to weigh in here. Unlike the other minor item, I think this is probably pretty substantial, and I see certainly no harm in allowing the public to weigh in a formal setting. So I'll call the question on the referral. That carries unanimously. Move on to G3, credit card payment service fee. Sorry, do you have something? Moving on to we referred it. G3, credit card payment service fee. Is going to get a motion, please? Moved by Councillor Pratt, seconded by Councillor Kuntz. Is there any discussion on G3? Councillor Richter.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, there's been a lot of talk in the news lately with regards to grocery stores using credit cards or grocery stores that allow credit cards to be used, charging an additional fee to the credit card holder for the use of that credit card. Now, I don't necessarily agree with this, but I'm just wondering, is this a practice that we should be looking into, that if people are going to pay with their credit cards, that we're not financing the cost of the credit card use?
Mr. Backen, go ahead.
So, Your Worship, that is in effect what this is saying. It's authorizing us to actually charge a bit of a surcharge equivalent to what we estimate the credit card charge fee to be, so that if a person has a $100 bill and they pay by cash or by debit card, it's $100, but if it's to be a credit card payment, because there's a 2% processing fee from the credit card company, we'd be looking to charge, in my example, $102. That's what we've understood most local governments are now doing to ensure there's some sort of uniformity in terms of the payment obligations that the residents may experience.
Okay, so have we gotten any public input on this one? Because I think the public should have a say on this one as well, and I'd like to move referral for public input opportunity.
Mr. Backen, we haven't done a process on this. No, this is seems fairly common throughout the region at this point.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay, but does the public understand that they're paying an additional fee if they use a credit card? And I don't think they do understand that, and I think they should have the opportunity to understand that and to have a say on it.
So if this were to be successful, then we would anticipate putting those notifications at payment locations or on the internet itself, so that we'd make sure that they have the ability to make the choice. That's what other jurisdictions are doing, and we would anticipate doing effectively the same process.
And Mr. Backen, I just want to clarify, we don't take credit card payments currently, is that correct?
That's correct.
Correct, so presumably when we would start taking credit card payments, we would inform them of the surcharge.
Correct.
Thank
Yeah, but at that point, they don't have any say in it.
Well,
Like, if they're going to use a credit card, they have to pay an extra fee.
But they can choose not to use a credit card.
Well, I still think we need public input, and I'd like to make a referral
I'll
for
come
that.
back to you. I have one more speaker. Councillor Kunst.
Yeah, can we just make sure there's no tip option? Just kidding.
Very, very appreciated that. Councillor Richter.
Yes, I'll make a referral for a public input opportunity.
There's a seconder to that?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Councillor Kunst. Is there any discussion on the referral? Seeing none, call the question on referral of G3. That fails with Councillor Bailey, Councillor Rent, Mayor Woodward, Councillor Martins, Councillor Van Popta, Councillor Pratt, and Councillor Ferguson opposed. Now back to the main motion. Is there any other discussion on G3? Seeing none, I'll call the question on G3. That carries with Councillor Richter opposed. Move on to G4, Langley Fees and Charges Bylaw Amendment. Can I get a motion, please? Moved by Councillor Van Popta, seconded by Councillor Martins. Is there any discussion? Councillor Richter.
Yes, I'd just like for staff to quickly highlight what are the main increases in this.
Mr. Backen, do we have a summary?
Your Worship, the majority of them are to realign us with other municipalities and to have inflationary increases. So usually in the 3 to 5%, and we've polled other municipalities to ensure that we're in line.
Okay, and again, there's no public input on this, so I'd like to make a referral for public input.
Okay, there's no other speakers, so I'll take that now. Is there a seconder to that?
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Kunst. Is there any discussion on the referral? Seeing none, I'll call the question on the referral of G4. And that fails with Councillor Bailey, Councillor Rent, Mayor Woodward, Councillor Martins, Councillor Van Popta opposed. Back to the main motion. Councillor Richter, do you have anything else?
No, that's fine.
Okay, seeing no other speakers, I'll call the question on G4. That carries with Councillor Richter opposed. Moving on to bylaws, we're still on bylaws for first, second, third reading. G5, sanitary sewer local area service 24 to 28 Avenue and 204 to 208 Street, bylaw number 5847. Get a motion, please. Anyone wish to move that? Moved by Councillor Pratt. Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Van Popta. Is there any discussion on G5? Seeing none, I'll call the question on G5. That fails with Councillor Bailey, Councillor Rent, Mayor Woodward, Councillor Martins, Councillor Van Popta, and Councillor Ferguson opposed. I'm going to move on to bylaws for final adoption. I1, Tree Protection Bylaw Update 2023, bylaw number 5838, 5841, and 5842. Can you get a motion, please? Moved by Councillor Pratt. Is there seconded by Councillor Kunst? Is there any discussion on this? Councillor Van Popta, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to make an amendment to the fees.
Good. Okay, I see no other speakers, so go ahead.
Okay, sorry?
We will hear the amendment. What's
Oh,
your,
okay.
what's your amendment?
Yeah, so I'll read the amendment out. Regarding Schedule 15 for the fees, the cash in lieu section, I'd like the building envelope, driveway, or septic field conflicts to be $2,000 per tree. Trees that are inappropriate for their species, size, or location, $100. Protected trees removed without a permit, $3,000. Under the permit to remove, I'd like building envelope or septic field conflicts at $2,000 per tree. And protected trees removed without a permit, $3,000.
Ms. Bauer, do you want that read back again? We should probably have that in case you need to have read it for a
Yes,
member of council.
we would like to have it one more time,
Councilor
please.
Impopta, can you do each one and then get an acknowledgement from the clerk that she has that?
Okay. So regarding cash in lieu, the building envelope, driveway, or septic field conflicts at $2,000 a tree. Trees that are inappropriate for their species, size, or location, $100. Protected trees removed without a permit, $3,000. And then under the permit to remove section, building envelope or septic field conflicts, $2,000 per tree. Protected trees removed without a permit, $3,000 per tree.
Ms. Bauer, do you want it one more time? Yep.
Yep, we're good.
You're good? You're good? Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councilor Martins. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Oh, Councilor Kuntz, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not going to support it. I feel like the fees are appropriate. So those are my comments.
Okay. Call the question on the amendment on I-1. And that carries with Councilors Kuntz and Councilor Richter opposed. Back to the main motion. If anyone want to speak to the main motion, please push the button again. Seeing no other discussion on the main motion, I'll call the question on I-1. That carries with Councilor Richter opposed. Move on to I-2, Initial Development Application Procedure Amendment Improvements, Bylaw number 5839. Is there a motion? I'm going to move that. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councilor Martins. Councilor Van Popte, did you want to speak to that?
Sorry, I'm still going through my stuff.
Where are we?
We're on I-2. I'll come back to you if you wish.
I didn't have a comment.
You did? I'll come back to you. Councilor Richter, go ahead. Yeah, I think it was software malfunction.
Sorry.
There you go.
I'm just wondering what the impact of this is going to be on council. What will now come to council? What will change? What will not come to council?
Through your worship, to Councilor Richter. In terms of the specific question, what would come to council or not, there's one portion of the amendments that deal with delegation portions of the amendments. So there's the delegation portion of residential development applications at 25 units per acre or less. They would be delegated to staff, as well as industrial applications in Gloucester, Aldergrove, and the rural plan area would also be delegated to staff. Having said that, there's a provision also in the bylaw that allows, upon council receipt of all those applications that are going forward, which is also another one of the amendments, there's a period of 3 weeks for council to nominate by advising the city clerk for a delegated development permit to proceed to council, if 3 or more members of council so desire.
Okay, but so I'm trying to understand this. So is council going to be aware of this or not?
Mr. Richardson, from what I understand, the bylaw also contemplates notification to council of any development application. Is that correct?
Through your worship, Councilor Richter, yes, that's correct. So all the amendments as well anticipate in initial phases until we have secured the software and implemented it. As part of council's distribution, all the development applications that are coming forward within 2 weeks of their receipt, that is, we're working diligently to have that automated. So there'll be that opportunity for council to see all those, as well as more broadly members of the public.
Okay, so are these actually going to come through now on items distributed rather than a council agenda?
Through your worship, Councillor Richter, only these that we're talking the development applications themselves, not ones that council are adjudicating upon.
Okay, I'm lost. I just want to know what the impact on council is going to be. So basically, development is going to proceed and council won't be aware of it. Is that what's going to happen?
No, that's not what's going to happen. Councillor Richardson, do you want to maybe go over it again?
Thank you, Your Worship, through to Councillor Richter. So, in effect, the process that's currently in place will remain. The only items that council will potentially not see will be delegated items. Those are residential applications at 25 units per acre or less, or industrial. Those are development permits for residential applications at a density of 25 units per acre or less, or development permits for industrial uses in Gloucester, Aldergrove, or the rural area. That's the only difference potentially council will see. There was an amendment to that delegation, as mentioned earlier. If 3 or more members of council indicate they would like to see a proposed delegated permit advanced to council for consideration, they would advise the city clerk, and then staff would advance it to council for council's consideration.
Okay, so I guess where I'm having difficulty understanding this is the delegated permits. Will a list of those come to council at some point?
Through your worship, that's correct.
Okay, and when and how will this list come?
They will come via council distribution under specific cover.
Okay, thank you.
As the applications come in, Mr. Richardson, I believe, right?
That's correct, Your Worship.
So rather than, my understanding is this reform would give council a greater awareness of some of the development permits items such that the council would be aware of them at the start of the application process, not at the end. Would that be correct, Mr. Richardson?
That's correct, Your Worship. It will provide a higher amount of information about the initial development applications, correct? And
Correct.
as indicated, working diligently to get that automated to streamline that.
That's correct. So I think that's the intent, is for council to actually be more aware, and if there's issues to raise, that they can be raised at the beginning of the process, not at the end. Do you have any other questions, Councilor Richter?
No, but I do have a comment, and I'm not thinking this is a positive move forward, so I'm not supporting it.
Okay, great. Councilor Ferguson?
Yes, if I may through a chair to Mr. Richardson or staff, the concept of this and the title is called Improvements. Mr. Richardson or Mr. Backen, do you anticipate a streamlining of an improvement, or is there some comment you can give? I know it's just a bylaw today, but have you got a suggestion of how that might improve, if I may, through a chair?
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Richardson. Mr. Backen.
Thank you, Worship, through to Councillor Ferguson. I guess this is maybe generally 3 sort of items that the amendments seek to achieve. One is touched on earlier, is additional information, especially initially through the council distribution to council, then also to the council and public. So more information there, I think, would be an improvement in terms of communication, information, and transparency in terms of those items. The second one, in terms of delegating the items down for development permits less than 25 UPA, and those industrial permit applications should speed up turnaround times, provide for efficiencies in terms of the staff approval process in terms of those items. There's a third item there in terms of communication, which is the on-site signage, having that on-site signage up early in the application process, within a number of weeks of the application versus just at the hearing stage. So I think collectively, there should be some efficiencies realized in that process, and also in terms of our communication and transparency, Your Worship.
Yeah, I wanted to add about the signage item, just for Councillor Ferguson. It would change it now that the signage will currently come down upon final adoption, which can take quite a long time. It's the situation we faced at Five Corners, where we have 2 signs that are up for years while the development's been approved in principle. This would seek to give the proponent the ability to pull those down after approval in principle.
And I know, as I may through the chair to you, I know that the bylaw is just being presented tonight. Well, the time will be in, but I think it's a step in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Van Popta, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that, we came into this term wanting to make efficiencies in our development process so we can build housing faster. And I think the fact that we're, kind of protected that if counselors are concerned about an application and there's, 3 people, that it can still come to the table. It's not like an application will just go through if we have concerns. So I'm excited about seeing this come to the table. This is the 3rd time that we've been talking about it. So, any concerns could have been addressed prior to the final reading here. So I'm just happy that we're getting this done.
Great, thank you. Councillor Pratt?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. And in terms of the overall bylaw, I'm pleased with the direction, but more specifically, just in regards to the ISDC changes, I think that's going to be a definite step in the right direction. I know that as proponents come forward to staff and the amount of work that goes into the ISDCs, without the certainty of whether or not the application is actually going to proceed at council, I know that will hopefully alleviate a lot of concerns, but also in the end, build housing faster and for less. So I'm excited about that change in particular. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'll highlight that for some members. What's being referred to there is a significant reduction in the requirement to complete a significant quantity of engineering to get to council for public and political consideration, which then leads very costly to make changes, very slow to make changes. So if there are any changes, the cost to the proponent is much lower for items that can be deferred to consideration for construction and final adoption. So again, I want to thank the staff. I want to thank Mr. Richardson in particular for bringing this forward in a very timely fashion. We hear every day about the lack of supply of housing. Metro Vancouver has got significant statistics, which I've now had a chance to look at. The housing shortage is significant. With the net migration to Metro Vancouver and immigration to Canada, the housing shortage is acute. And I think we should continue to do whatever we can to make it less costly to produce housing, less time consuming, not only for proponents, but also for staff, and also allow for the public to have input when changes are less expensive to make. And I think these are a number of good improvements. And as we see how they work and don't work, we can always continue to improve them or modify them based upon putting them into action. So again, I want to thank the staff for bringing this forward. And for those of us worried about the cost of listing crisis out there, of course, one of the ways to address that is to increase the supply of housing. Great. So with that, I'll call the question on I2. That carries with Councillor Richter opposed. Let's move on to I3, Township of Langley Emergency Program Bylaw Update, Bylaw number 5845. Is there a mover? Moved by Councillor Bailey, seconded by Councillor Martins. Is there any discussion on I3? Seeing none, call the question. That carries unanimously. Move on to I4, rezoning application number 100598 and development permit application number 101141. Get a motion, please. Moved by Councillor Pratt. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Van Popta. Go ahead, Councillor Pratt.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through yourself to staff. Appreciate the context and a lot of the information that I received as a new councillor, and having not been a part of this application previously. 2 questions I had that I couldn't find the answer to myself reading the actual housing agreement. One would be how many or what's the quantity of DCCs that are being waived for this project, and 2, what's the term, the actual number of years on the covenant attached to this?
Mr. Richardson, do you have those numbers handy for the quantity of units that are under consideration?
Sorry, not the quantity. How long?
That would lead to the DCC number you asked for.
Sure.
And then the duration of the covenant.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. There's 133 rental units proposed. 40 of them, or the minimum threshold of 30%, are being considered under the DCC waiver bylaw. The term of the housing agreement is 20 years as outlined in the definitional portion of the housing agreement.
And I believe that the way the bylaw works, it leads to a complete waiver of all DCCs for all units. Is that true, Mr. Richardson?
That's correct, Your Worship.
Does that answer your question?
Yep.
You want the number? Are you looking for the number?
I could do that math. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, great. Seeing no other discussion, I'll call the question on I4. And that fails with Councillor Bailey, Councillor Rint, Mayor Woodward, Councillor Martins, Councillor Van Popta, and Councillor Ferguson opposed. No need to consider the development permit. So move on to K1, minutes of committees, Recreation, Culture, and Parks Advisory Committee, Seniors Advisory Committee. Can I get a motion to receive the minutes, please? Moved by Councillor Bailey, seconded by Councillor Martins. Call the question on K1. It carries unanimously. What do we got here? Mayor and council report. Is there anybody who wishes to make a report? I'll be making my mayor's report for the quarter at the next council meeting. Is there anyone who has a council report? Councillor Pratt, go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick shout out, Your Worship. As a former Brookswood graduate, pretty proud of Brookswood Junior Boys in the semifinals tonight of the Provincial Championships at the LEC. So just shout out to them. And RE Mountain was in the tournament as well, and they gave it their best go. So pretty proud of the two Langley teams. So looking forward to, if we get out of here in time, catching the semis
That's
tonight.
where you're headed? Okay, great. Councillor Kunst.
Yeah, I just wanted to report that I went to the UBCM executive meeting this past week, and wanted to invite all of council to the housing summit that's happening in April. We will be discussing all kinds of the challenges with housing, and Premier Eby will be there as well as Mr. Kalon. So I was tasked to make sure that our council is informed and that we will all attend. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks. Moving on to M, Metro Vancouver and Regional Committee Representatives Report. Again, I'll probably do that in March. Do you want to report anything, Councillor Ferguson? Any other, Councillor Van Popter, Councillor Martins? Councillor Ferguson?
Certainly, yeah. We went through a rigorous agenda looking at a number of initiatives. We'll be coming forward with, as you said yourself, with budgeting and other items. And it's, again, we're still at the learning stages. There's a number of issues coming forward, and we look forward to presenting a detailed, I guess, report to staff coming up in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Martins?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to quickly say, last week I spent 2 days at the Fraser Valley Regional Library orientation workshop along with Councillor Kunst. Yeah. So great information, great learning. And from that, I have made a request that they do a presentation to the Mayor and Council later this spring, specifically asking for some user data, as well as they can provide that information and just more Langley specific information.
Great, thanks. Seeing no other discussion, Ms. Barrow, why don't we take a 5-minute break now? It's been about almost 2 hours, and we'll come back at 3:25. All right, thanks. So get back underway here. N1, items from prior meetings, 207A and 207 Street Strata Road conversion to public road. Now, Ms. Bauer, this is already on the floor with the mover and seconder as listed, is that correct?
That is right.
That's correct. So I brought this back. I think it's appropriate here with the item in the agenda with a potential draft motion. So I will move that. Is there a second? It's seconded by Councillor Martins. Is there any discussion? Councillor Richter.
Yeah, this particular motion requires a number of changes to 207A Street anyway. And I'm just wondering what the cost of all those changes are going to be.
Mr. Backen, I would presume that would be within the report to council requested by the motion?
That's my understanding, Your Worship.
Okay, so the intent of bringing this back is to ensure that all this additional information comes to council as part of the 2023 budget?
Don't think it mentioned a specific budget year, Councillor Richter. So it would presumably be in a future budget.
The original motion said as part of the 2023 budget.
We may attempt that, but Mr. Backen, that may not be achievable given the timeline, given when this motion was first considered. Do you have any thoughts on that?
No, that's correct, Your Worship. We're getting tight on the time, so I mean, we can have a look at it, but it may take a bit more to find the more precise numbers.
Okay, so is the original motion being amended to drop 2023, or it's just going to continue through and hopefully get to 2023?
Mr. Backen, I would presume that unless we give you direction to hold up the 2023 budget, that this would be seen as new direction that will take as long as it takes, and it may or may not make the 2023 budget. Would that be fair?
No, that's correct, Your Worship. There's more detail here now than from the previous matter where the report was going to be focusing, so now we'll have to actually do some costing and, of course, include those cost items in the budget.
Okay, and that's for both 207. 207A is listed, there's 5 items there. Is the intent that the same 5 items would apply to 207 as well?
No, that's not contemplated in the motion, Councillor Richter. Item 3 is only where 207 is mentioned, and that would be specific to, those items in clause 3 would be specific to 207.
Okay, I'm having trouble understanding what the intent and the effect of this change is, because the original motion said receive the 207A and 207 Street Strata report road conversion to public road for information and consideration as part of the 2023 budget. The subsequent motion says that council hereby directs staff to proceed with the completion of a consensual expropriation.
That's correct.
All right, so is what we're doing, we're going to go ahead with this now, but there's going to be costs for these changes coming back, because the devil's in the details here, and I'm not getting the details.
What I understand the motion to be doing is simultaneously receiving and directing staff. We could certainly divide that. The item here, number 1, consensual expropriation, is a relatively low-cost item as outlined in the staff report. Item 2 is a report to council considering potential improvements as it's converted from a strata road to a public road to be considered by council at a future budget process or otherwise funded. And item 3 is to proceed with the assumption of OMR, which will cost what it will cost.
All right, so if we're directing staff to go ahead and proceed with this, what's the cost?
The item 2 is the report to council that will presumably outline those items for council to consider. I don't suspect all of A to E are required for conversion to public road. In fact, they're not. And so we have to council to look at the options related to cost in the report to council requested. Item 3 as an assumption of OMR. Mr. Backen or Mr. Zwag, do you have a potential range of what OMR for that might cost?
Thank you, through your worship. I'm going back from memory from the last report, where we identified the operations and maintenance from 207th Street to be about $10,000 to $20,000 a year.
That's what I recall.
But I do not recall including rehabilitation or major repairs. So be mindful that's an additional cost that may not have been estimated before.
Yeah, so rehabilitation and major repairs would be something when it disintegrates maybe 20, 30 years from now. Would that be correct, Mr. Zwag?
Okay,
Yeah.
so if we pass this amendment as it's presented, we're saying staff are going to go ahead and do this consensual expropriation on 207A Street. They're going to proceed with the assumption of doing the same thing, I guess, for 207 Street.
We're not expropriating 207 Street, Councilor Richter.
Okay, and we're going to add more costs in, but we don't know what the costs are, and they won't be coming in 2023.
Dragon.
Your worship, I'll give it a try, because it is unfortunate that the streets are so close to each other, being 207A and 207. So what we understand the direction to be, going back to square one, is there was a report. That report was received, and as part of that, we were to report further on that matter. This note and the motion contained therein directs us then to proceed with the completion of a consensual expropriation, because that would be necessary for the strata as if they're going to be distributing or devolving, I guess, common property. They really can only do so by a bylaw from the strata corporation or by way of the expropriation process, and the bylaw may require 75 to 85% approval ratings. We would then report to council then on the other items, A to E, and as was said, some of those may be, I guess, recommended or needed, and others may not. It'll depend upon the evaluation contained in the report. And lastly, we'll go with number 3, which is as to 207 Street, not 207A Street, but 207 Street, which would then be for the OMR, the operation, maintenance, and rehabilitation of the roadway itself on 207 between 80th and 82nd. And as Mr. Zwag indicated, that's likely going to be at a cost of $20,000 to $30,000 per year, subject to any structural or major issues that would arise. But as was referenced, it's likely that this road's in pretty good shape, but down the road it may need further assistance.
Okay, but I thought I just heard Mr. Swag say the 10 to 20 grand a year was for the operation, not for maintenance and rehabilitation.
That's correct. I think that's what I was trying to articulate, that the OMR is for the operations and maintenance, and the to a limited rehabilitation, for example, potholes or things of that nature. But if the road surface itself would have to be replaced, that would be down the road. Again, given the age of that road, it's unlikely that would be needed for a certain period of time, but that would be subject to further evaluation, but it would be a few years out at least.
Okay. And the last question that I have on this, are these the only 2 roads that we're going to be doing this for? Or are there going to be more coming?
Mr. Bracken, are you going to attempt to predict the future?
Sometimes, Your Worship, I was just going to take a different approach and simply say that this is our direction so far. This is 207A and 207. If further come up, it would be subject to council's direction.
That's correct.
Okay, well then perhaps the question I should be asking, are we going to stop building these strata roads for public use in subsequent developments?
Again, I think that's a question that has to be looked at in the context of the development here. I think the intent was to recognize a grander, if you will, total site size, so that there could be some expansion of the units. And in regards to that, there was going to be some sort of public access over a piece of it. Over time, we've learned that's very complicated, especially when there's a school in the area. So I think the lessons learned from this could mean going forward that it's still a tool we could use, but it has to be used more selectively.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Oh, yes, thank you. I think this is a prime opportunity to work now with the residents on something that they came first, and then the school came after, and the park after that. And with a challenge of folks using their strata road as a public road, and sometimes rat racing, both for school issues and for park issues, I think this is a good solution. The residents have been talking to both our staff and council for many years now, and I think this is a good suggestion, both for the 2 roads. As far as the future, well, we always do the best we can, but the difficulty is schools are important, and they're not making more land, so they found a site, and the province came on board. So hopefully we will not run into this again, but you never know. We have to find locations for schools as best we possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pratt.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through yourself to staff, just in regard to item 3, with 207 specifically, is my understanding correct that there are technically structural changes that would have to occur to the road for it to meet township's local road standards, specifically about the parking angles and things like that on either side. But since we're not taking actual ownership, we're not expropriating it, at this time, we're not required to change those aspects of the road. Is that correct?
That's correct. So assuming maintenance of the road itself, given the nature and location of it, but not taking it over as a public road, so no changes are required. Mr. Zweig, can you confirm that?
That is correct.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Seeing no other discussion, I'll call the question. And one. That carries unanimously. Move on to other business. P1, Councillor Pratt, go ahead. No, it's not working. It's not a touch screen. I tell everybody it's not. There we go. Councillor Pratt,
Thank
go
you,
ahead.
Your Worship. I'll move the motion as submitted.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Bailey. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Just to quickly give some high-level notes on why this motion today. So, as everybody knows, we've seen in our budget package, there is some significant costs associated with rehabilitation of the runway that are going to be required, and this hasn't been a priority of past councils, and so now it's on us to try and at least come up with a solution for it. And part of that, I believe, is working with different levels of government to find a way to that the burden on the Langley taxpayers is as low as possible. And the first step is pursuing a provincial program that specifically requires a positive resolution of council in support of at least going for that provincial money. So that's what the cause of this motion is today. And so it isn't necessarily committing the township at this point to any expenditures besides the $75,000 from the already existing airport reserve.
Great. No other discussion. I'll call the question on P1. That carries unanimously. Move on to P2. It's notice of motion for myself, Affordable Housing DCC Incentives Bylaw Update. I'll move that. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Van Popta. I'll speak to it briefly. I think this kind of speaks for itself. It's in regards to a DCC development cost charge waiver for affordable and supportive housing bylaw that I would suggest to council actually produces no affordable housing. So the reform here is to get a staff report based upon the descriptive items listed there to not allow this to be used by for-profit corporations to get their fees waived. That's it. Thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none, call the question on P2. That carries unanimously. Move on to P3. Councillor Pratt.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Just as I await some clarification on some issues, I just want to declare conflict on item 3, 4, and 5, just based on some past planning work that I was involved in. So just waiting for some clarification around that, yep. And hopefully at a future date.
So hopefully you can participate in these debates in future meetings. So I'm going to move P3, completion of Fraser Highway by 2030, seconded by Councillor Martins. Is there any discussion? I'll speak to it a little bit. Again, I think it speaks to itself. It is to see and direct staff to start working on a plan and a pathway to completion and widening of Fraser Highway by 2030 to 264th and Murrayville, and a number of ways to achieve that through partnership with TransLink, which can continue, and then look at a plan to widen some of the more challenging sections. So is there any other discussion? Seeing none, call the question on P3. That carries unanimously with Councillor Pratt absent. Move on to P4, Fraser Highway Employment Lands Area Plan. I'll move that. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Ferguson. This one here is to start a process to consider the formalization of what's occurring on Fraser Highway anyway, which is employment lands usage, and looking at a pathway to see the community benefit from that with the formalization of employment lands with service infrastructure and a lengthy public input process here in the township and with Metro Vancouver. Councillor Richter.
Will this, if this passes, will the plan be going for public input?
Yes, it will. So it would be following the standard plan for neighborhood planning process with an environmental assessment, consideration of community amenity contributions and public input. Mr. Richardson, can you just confirm that? It mentions consultation in A1.
That's correct, Your Worship. The typical processes you've outlined would have a public consultation component, environmental studies, as well as engineering servicing plan. And as you mentioned, the process will also likely require engagement with our partners in Metro Vancouver.
And a public hearing.
And there would be a public hearing?
There would.
Okay, and we've been down this before in terms of putting water on Fraser Highway, and it was prohibitively expensive at the time. So will the costs of water and sewer, I think sewer's already there. No, it's up on Robertson Crescent now. So will the costs for water and sewer be coming back to council?
Mr. Beck, and I believe that before initiation of any servicing, that would be either through the development process provided by proponents or within the budget process, subject to council approval and public input?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay, and are we sure that these lands are going to be used for employment opportunities and not residential?
Mr. Back, and I think that there are some areas which maybe are applicable to residential, but that would be confirmed through the planning process, I believe.
That's correct, Your Worship, as well. We're only dealing with the non-agricultural land reserve properties in this zone, this location, so that would further limit it.
I mean, my understanding is maybe some aren't appropriate for employment uses, Councillor Richter.
And finally, with regards to Fraser Highway, is Fraser Highway going to be able to handle the additional traffic that would come from having employment lands there?
Mr. Richardson or Mr. Zwag, presently that would reveal itself through the planning process?
And as well through item number 3 previously passed about completion of Fraser Highway by 2030, Your Worship.
Correct.
So whatever's done with completing Fraser Highway, it will be completed to a standard that would support employment lands? Is that the intent?
That's correct. It would have to have the traffic capacity to deal with those, and I think that goes part and parcel with P3.
Okay, thank you.
My understanding, Councillor Richter, this is one of the advantages to bringing these three together simultaneously. Seeing no other discussion, I'll call the question on P4. Carries unanimously with Councillor Pratt absent. Move on to P5, potable water infrastructure on Fraser Highway. I will move that. Is there a seconder? No, he's in conflict on this one as well. He also declared a conflict all the way to P5. Councillor Kunst. Yeah. Seconded by Councillor Martins. Is there any discussion? I'll speak to it again a little bit in regards to this is starting the process to bring this back to council. Here is asking staff for a report to council on the feasibility and cost to provide potable water and fire protection infrastructure along Fraser Highway between 223 and 264th to include but not necessarily limited to reporting back on servicing objectives, analysis, limitations, possible additions, regulatory, environmental approvals process, related information, public consultation and engagement, identification of funding sources, grant programs, and other possible cost recovery mechanisms, and some funding to start the design process. Councillor Richter.
Yeah, we had this discussion in a previous council, and I recall, I recalled earlier and I recall again, the costs were extremely high at the time for water along Fraser Highway, and there was also the issue of putting water and sewer together on the same route, and that was why we separated them at the time. So what does this mean? Does this mean that we're going to be basically putting another water system into Aldergrove?
Mr. Bagan, I believe this is contemplating an extension of Metro Vancouver service.
That's correct, Your Worship. So it's quite correct. When we looked at the routing for the major trunk lines, the routing that was chosen was a bit further to the north. That, however, did not preclude the establishment of water services on Fraser Highway in that location, which would work particularly well if there was going to as well be a industrialization of the lands there and an expansion of the roadway. So the cost would actually be more of a local nature as opposed to the trunk lines regional nature to, I guess, to serve the areas that are ultimately going to be looked at as employment lands.
Okay. So what vision are we thinking of for Fraser Highway? Because obviously these are crafted motions for the purpose of changing what Fraser Highway looks like.
Your Worship, my understanding is simply that this is going to look at the lands that are, I guess, somewhat of a patchwork quilt in that corridor and trying to recognize the needs and take advantage of some of the land uses that are there to put in some sort of employment lands or industrial lands. It's a difficult corridor because there are segments that are heavily within the ALR, for example, 248th to 256th, and then there's some areas that are have very limited ALR, at least along the frontage, which is 232nd to 240th. So I would say the vision would be to try to take the corridor, to renew it by the use of employment land designations, provide services, and then during that process add the ability to have water and as well to improve the road network, hopefully to 4 lanes.
Okay, so the work that's being done right now, and there's a lot of it being done in around the 248th Street area, is that all going to have to be redone if we're going to put water in along there?
No, the actual land, I guess, between 244 and 249, I guess would be, that's being, I guess, built to the ultimate width because it's going to have the turn lanes and the flow-throughs. For that process, we're actually installing stormwater and other connections as needed. I'm not quite certain about the potable water connections, but I know that there's probably those that would be off the road network if they were needed that could be connected.
So is the intent here to put a water system in place? There is a private water system on 248th. I think it serves the Otter Co-op area and up to Robertson Crescent. Is the intent of this to put that area on Metro Water?
That would be the preference, is to, if the water does go through that far, it would be to encourage them to actually join that water supply, as would give them more stable, I guess, supply of both potable water and as well for fire suppression purposes.
Okay, and the fire infrastructure that's referred to here, is it basically fire hydrants that are being looked at?
At this point, yes. I mean, we really can't design the system till we complete the plan, but I think the ideal situation would be to have water with sufficient pressure or lines with sufficient pressure that it could actually work as fire suppression through the whole corridor.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Bracken, I would also maybe get confirmed that if water infrastructure was run along Fraser Highway between 223 and out to 264th, the staff report may reveal that extending beyond 248th may have limited return. But it also, if it were extended to 264th, it would have 2 benefits: that if there are going to be some formalization of employment lands, that some of those facilities would not be required to put tanks in the ground to supply sprinkler service. They would have sufficient water supply and pressure to avoid those costs. The other thing would be that it would be possible over the long run to see a redundancy of supply of potable water delivery to Aldergrove from West Langley. Would that be a fair summary of some of the benefits, maybe not outlined here?
No, both of those are correct. The ability for increased fire suppression and potentially a further connection in case of redundancy to Aldergrove would also be positive. Yeah.
So we are going to get a report back with outlining the full cost before we proceed further, or is the intent here that yes, we'll get a report, but we're still going to proceed?
I believe we can't predict the intent of council in the future, Councillor Richter, but this is for a report to council, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Seeing no other discussion, I'll call the question on P5. That carries unanimously with Councillor Pratt absent. Councillor Ferguson, do you want to bring back Councillor Pratt? Great, so I'll move on to P6, public consultation and council consideration of Horn Pit. I'll move that. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Martins. Is there any discussion? I will touch on this briefly. I think the motion speaks for itself. I think it's time to bring Horn Pit out of special closed into the public domain to be discussed, adjudicated, reviewed, considered by public input. The Brookswood neighborhood planning process is still out there. Draft neighborhood plans have been posted on the website for some time. I think it's appropriate for Horn Pit to have a public conversation and public input, starting with a presentation of where it's at. Mr. Bracken, do you want to provide some additional context for how this might proceed?
Thank you, Your Worship. So I guess there's two layers or two levels that have to be considered or contemplated. The first is the actual site itself, what the options are for the site given its constraints, given it has been a site that's been filled with structural fill, and given the fact that it does have some traffic concerns or considerations, and as well some environmental considerations because of the natural habitat on the site. To look at the site, though, with the various options that are applicable, we have to try to look at the larger area, and that would be the Fernridge plan itself. In doing so, we would want to ensure that this project or this property fits within the larger Fernridge plan. So our objective, I think, would be to try to bring to you on the 17th of April, both an update onto this and an update, and hopefully maybe further on the Fernridge plan itself and maybe the other plans as well. Because it's only looking in context, I think, that we get a better picture of what this could actually look like.
And I believe there's council direction from last November to see some progress on the Brookswood draft neighborhood plans as well. So I think this is appropriate, long overdue to see Horn Pit dealt with transparently. Councillor Richter.
Yeah, and if we're going to move forward with this, does it also allow for the opportunity that, should the public wish it, that the lands be used for park?
Mr. Bracken, I believe that could reveal that desire by some in the community, which I've heard myself, would be reveal itself through a public input process, which council could refer upon receiving the presentation, potentially consider public input options.
Yeah, that's correct. We look at the presentation as being sort of the initiation of the process, and then council will dictate where that process is going to go and what that, I guess, public input is going to look like.
Okay, well, we haven't had much luck on public input today, but all right, thank you.
Thank you. See no other discussion. I'll call the question on P6. That carries unanimously. Councillor Ferguson, go ahead.
Yes, I'm certainly just going to move P7 right now, property tax levies.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Van Popta. You want to discuss it, Councillor Ferguson?
Oh, yeah, just basically, thank you. I just wanted to say that during our budget deliberations over the last few weeks, I on my own, I began looking at what other communities were doing. And I also mentioned the concept of a levy several times. And with that, I looked at, on a continuing basis, what other communities were doing. And I'm not saying other communities were doing levies, but they have in the past. Usually they're specific, related to specific projects. And that's why I've known that we have plans, and we've discussed looking at how we can improve police service, fire services, and bylaw services. So I came up with those three things because those are important points and concepts to our electorate. We like to have a safe community. We like the people do following rules and bylaws, and we like to have protection by fire as well. So that's what I came up with. And if you look at the example of anywhere from Abbotsford Delta, Langley City, Richmond, Surrey, and Vancouver were the ones, there's other ones, I guess, that we could discuss in the future. But the thing is, Langley Township, we have some major challenges, the same challenges that some of the other communities have. And I'm sure we just went through an election. I'm sure that every single community in the province, in this case, the region, all of those candidates and all those mayors and councillors throughout the region all thought that they could probably come to the table in 2023 with favorable or relatively fair or low budgets for the 2023 year. That has not ended up being the case. It's been a surprise to myself and others. It's been on the news throughout the province on an ongoing basis. Those kind of challenges exist in this community as well. So I wanted to put this on the table for folks to consider, and I learned this from the electorate a number of times years ago. Number one, you can accept this, you can accept some of it, or you can throw all of it out. But it's important for me because I feel passionate about the fact that we should be looking at being within the, I guess the percentages of our neighbors. I've also added this, it's not very easy to read, but it's actually at the average single-family house dwelling and average single-family multiple dwelling of where Langley Township is. And perhaps you want to look at that, that will come up again at budget deliberations, but we are relatively low. And a 1% increase for us does not do anywhere near as much as it would do for a community like West Vancouver, or even White Rock, Port Moody, or Vancouver, New Westminster. It gives you an idea of how you look at financial plans and how you look at percentages, and how we have, in a way, fallen behind, despite that we have delivered excellent services in the township. So those are my comments, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you. I certainly appreciate you bringing the idea forward for discussion at a minimum. I just wanted to mention, though, that Vancouver is not 5% anymore. They're now, from my understanding, last week, they're now close to 9 or 10%. So you can certainly, I just updated that in my notes. Councillor Richter.
Yeah, so I just want to clarify that the intent of this motion, if I'm reading it correctly, is that we're going to put a 2% property tax levy in place now and in all future budgets for fire, police, and bylaws. Is that the intent?
I don't see bylaw mentioned. Mr. Backen, how would this potentially work if it were adopted by council?
Right there.
Thank you, Your Worship. We noting the reference to the 1% property tax levy, so in discussing that with finance, we think that's really intended to represent a sum that would then be applied over all the entire population. So it would be a levy, but it would be a consistent amount, but it would be based on our property tax increase of 1%, which for us I think yields about $1.4 to $1.5 million. So that's our understanding of it. That would then last until council directs otherwise through a subsequent budget session.
So, in other words, it's a 2% levy that's going to go in place now. It's being pre-approved now, and it will stay in place for the foreseeable future.
Just gonna correct that. I don't see a pre-approval here. I see a direct staff to add the following to budget calculations as opposed to maybe add it to the bylaw. So I think there's some clarification with the mover there, but I certainly take your point, Councillor Ritter.
Well, I think there needs to be public input on this.
I'll move on. Are you done,
done.
Councillor Pratt?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and through yourself to Councillor Ferguson or to staff, whoever can take a go. So, just building on the questions from Councillor Richter, the 1% and the 1%, they're just in addition to whatever property tax levy we would have decided on anyways, which would include money allocated for police, fire, and bylaw. So this is just in order to get more money every year set aside. So if we say that this, for instance, if we achieved our 4% desired property tax increase as directed by council, it would in fact be 6% this year. That's correct. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. No, Mr. Bracken, you and I discussed this a little bit this morning, the difference between property tax increase and the addition of a levy. Maybe you can give some context to the difference.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. I think sometimes the word levy gets associated with a parcel tax, and in talking to the Director of Finance, we don't interpret this to be a parcel tax, but instead interpret this to be really an additional way to raise revenue through a sum, in this case $1.4 to $1.5 million, being the levy that's attributed over the I guess the households or the tax base itself. In that way, then, it effectively does have a specific charge, but it's something that would be for a specific purpose, and that purpose, of course, would be, as outlined, both fire protection services and police and bylaw services.
Yeah, so if future councils, the question I had was that if it's 1% that's earmarked the way the motion contemplates, that could be changed by future councils. They would just be able to say, we're no longer putting it to this, we're putting it to that, unlike maybe like a levy for a specific purpose.
You're quite correct. Council's discretion is not unfettered. Council's discretion is unfettered. It's not intended to fetter it through this process. Rather, I think it's just the language in terms of using the term levy in this case. It could be discontinued, or it could also be redirected to another category, or it could just be simply removed.
I think the motion sort of raising the fact that the majority of the budget from the Township of Langley is devoted towards fire and police services. I see it does actually mention bylaw, so I missed that. I think, Councillor Ferguson, if you're okay with it, it seems a bit late in the budget process. I know that, I think, Mr. Beckham, we only have a few meetings left in which we could even meet the requirements for the timing of a budget bylaw. So I might, Councillor Ferguson, if you're going to refer this to further consideration at the 2024 budget. Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Martins. Councillor Ferguson, go ahead.
Yeah, I certainly don't have any problem with that. I know it's late. It also gives us an opportunity, and I want to just keep reminding everybody, this is something I came up on my own. So no one directed me. It didn't come from any other source. We'll get an idea of what other communities are also doing and how that's going to translate and I guess affect both the residents in the region. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense, but it doesn't change the fact that we in the Township of Langley have to do the same type of things that others have to do. We have to have police, we have to have fire, we have to have our staff, pay them accordingly, and we've got all sorts of challenges because we're a large community of many roads and many services that have to be delivered. And also, there's one last thing I have to mention every single time. If you look at the list today, is that, where's my list? You have a casino in Delta now, you have a casino in Langley City, and you have something in Surrey that they have some sort of a gaming, and also Richmond, and the last one would be Coquitlam. So I just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ferguson. I personally appreciate the conversations around some of the challenges that we're going to have in the future. Other communities are raising taxes at 6%, 17%, 10%, 12% in the case of our neighbor. And the expectation that we're going to be able to deliver the same service levels without doing the same when we're only given one option to raise revenue fees, well, two options fees, which are cost recovery and property taxation. It's very limited. I think this council and the staff will going to be working, I think Mr. Backen's still working on ensuring we're not going to be experiencing these tax increases that are listed here on this page, but it will be a challenging in coming years without casino revenue, without other options to continue to provide the same service levels, but we certainly appreciate the desire and the need to keep property taxes as competitive as possible. But we are one of the lowest taxed communities in the region, and it will continue to be a struggle to maintain service levels while others continue to raise taxes at 10% per year on average or higher. So with that, I'll call the question on the referral, P7. And that carries with Councillor Richter opposed. Move on to other business. I have one. Mr. Backen, I wanted to highlight items distributed from February 23rd, item 4. There was a memo regarding February 23rd, a memo regarding the grant opportunity for TOL 150 celebration events. Staff are looking for pre-approval of $150,000 to proceed to try to obtain some additional grant funding. So I'll make that motion to approve that. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Ferguson. I'm going to open up a secondary queue. Is there any discussion on pre-approving this as requested in this memo? Councillor Richter, go ahead.
I don't disagree with it, but I just want to know, will we have a committee helping out on this? I believe that's come up also in items distributed.
And Mr. Bagan, do you have any background on the process here to determine this? I think it's, of course, just looking to pursue the grant, but do you have any information on how we're going to pull these events together yet?
Thank you, Your Worship. We really haven't drilled down in terms of what the process would look like, primarily because we don't actually have a budgetary figure yet consolidated. That's hence why the application for the grant. Council will have the ability to shape and form that as we go forward with that matter. In the past, we've had many different forms of committees ranging from council to, well, I guess it would be a standing committee, to a select committee, or to just citizens committees that are out there to undertake these sorts of things. Of course, the Township 150 being somewhat special may necessitate a program that we haven't yet envisioned.
Yeah, Councilor Richter, do you have any follow-up on that?
No, I just wanted to find out if we were going to get some community input on it, because there seems to be interest out there in that happening.
I think for now, let's get on with the grant application, but certainly appreciate the desire for multiple people to want to be involved in the celebration. We'll call the question on, I guess we'll call this, Ms. Bauer, P8?
P8, yes, correct.
That carries unanimously. Councillor Richter, go ahead.
Yeah, I've got a number of items distributed also from February 23rd. Item number 2 on page 27. I was just wondering, this one particular field, is it only used by that one group, NLDS? It seems that they've got it booked 7 days a week, April to mid-October until 9 p.m. So are they the only group playing on that field?
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, through your worship. Yeah, that's correct. During ball season, that's the our association that's booked that field.
Okay, and will they be contributing to the cost of this?
I believe they pay fees, Mr. Swag, is that correct?
That's correct, your worship.
Yeah, but do their fees cover this improvement? I guess that's a question I should ask.
The memo contemplates some programming changes, so there's negligible cost increases for that.
Okay, thank you. Number 3 on page 29, the bike, the road race. I'm wondering if there will be notification to residents who normally walk on these routes. And I brought this up in the last council. I'm going to continue to bring it up. We have the roadways, 248th Street in particular, but I think it's happening on a lot of other routes, where the sidewalks or the roadsides are now marked as bike routes. So I've raised the question about who does the priority go to if these are marked as bike routes? Is it bikes or residents who are walking? And I was told in the last council that the intent was that these are not bike paths but multimodal paths. So if they are multimodal paths, will the residents be notified that this route is going to be used for a bike race?
Thank you, through your worship. The notifications will be as per usual, which is to our website and our advertisements. There's no resident-specific notifications going out, but that could be contemplated if so desired by council.
Could we put something on the township page, maybe?
Correct.
Okay. Item number 6 on page 35. I'm just wondering what the original complaint is, because it wasn't included. So what is the original complaint that the person had?
Mr. Bracken, do you want to follow up with Councillor Richter on that? Not sure how you're going to pull that in a moment.
And item number 8 on page 38, is a response going to be sent to this resident about the fitness facility?
Mr. Bracken, I believe that resident did receive a response, but can you double check and confirm?
Okay, item number 9 on page 39, is a response going to be sent on this one as well?
Yeah, there was a response. I believe I did see the response go out. They were informed also that there's a presentation for Horn Pit coming forward in April. So yes, they did receive a response, Councillor Richter.
Okay, and item number 10 on page 40, with regards to soil dumping on 8th Avenue, has a response been sent to the person who put this in, and will council get a status report on it?
And Mr. Bracken, I believe a response has been sent. Also, I understand they've been issued a stop work order while staff are following up. Is that correct? Yeah. So that's been also handled.
Okay, but has it stopped? I guess that's.
Well, they've been issued a stop work order and staff are processing the file. Yeah.
Okay, and item number 11 on page 42. Again, area residents have some concerns. Is a response going to be sent to them on it?
Mr. Bracken, you can double check. There's been a response on this one. I think there has been.
I think so, Your Worship. If it helps, each communication coming in does get a response, but sometimes it may simply be an acknowledgement of receipt. But we can follow up on number 11, yes.
And then the challenge here with the way you might want to repair or change the process here around items distributed, because we'll get this on the 23rd. The response will go out on the 25th, and it'll end up in the 27th distribution. And then how do you link them if you've only looked at the 23rd distribution? Yeah. Councillor Richter,
Is that a criticism, Mr. Woodward?
Mayor Woodward, actually. But no, it's not a criticism. I'm trying to improve the process, Councillor Richter.
Really? Okay, so are you saying I shouldn't be raising these? Because that's
You
what it sounds
can
like.
raise them if you wish.
Yeah,
I'm not
I
sure
do
why
wish-
you would, I don't know
I
why you would
do wish
interpret
to
it.
raise them.
I don't know why you would interpret it that way.
Okay, item number 12 on page 45, I'd like to thank staff very much for responding to this one, because I did see that response.
That's good. Are you finished, Councilor Victor?
Yes, I am, thank you.
Is there any other speakers under other business? Seeing none, I'll get a motion to resolve into special close, moved by Councilor Pratt, seconded by Councilor Martins. Councilor Ferguson, you have an item?
Personnel.
Seeing no others, I'll, Councilor Kunz, you have an item?
So property.
Right, seeing no others, I'll get just a show of hands. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Carries. Get a motion to terminate, moved by Councilor Pratt, seconded by Councilor Martins. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Thanks. Convene a special closed at 4:25.